What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. This is episode number 91. The rain is pouring outside. Will and I have water jugs ready to get hydrated, and we are ready to dive deep into the glacial aspects of the anime industry for our Anime Iceberg number 2. Joining us on this trek into the Arctic Circle of weebdom is my explorer partner, Will, and I am your other explorer partner, Jason. What's up?
Nice that you're opening this with the explorer theme, because we are going to be doing a deep dive into the dark depths of some really, really weird shit in anime and manga. By the way, just in case anybody was wondering, no, we're not refilling our water jugs with the rainwater outside. Don't ever fucking do that. I did that as a kid and I got a fever immediately. So, yeah, acid rain is not fun.
Also, Hong Kong doesn't have the best water.
No,
like we can't drink like in the U.S. or North America, right?
You can drink tap water in Hong Kong. It's just not recommended. The only reason why is because we have a high level of like fluoride in the water, and it's it's also kind of like it's hard water, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so that's why like I think when people move over to Asia, particularly like here in Hong Kong, I've heard in Korea as well, when you start showering and you're washing your hair with the water here, that it ends up actually like sort of weakening the strength of your hair. So people start like actually recommending to install like water softeners in their faucets.
And that's real, by the way. Soft and hard water. It may sound like that's not scientific. That's a real thing.
I think people in the UK will know, because UK water is extremely hard.
Right.
And so like everybody that I know has some sort of like water softener in their bathrooms, just so that they don't lose their hair after like washing. Like
I never had to use one before.
Yeah, well, you've lived in cities that had good water. I've lived in some cities that had some pretty terrible water quality. But yeah, that's not the focus of this topic. Though we are going to be deep diving into some treacherous waters. As you may have noticed from the title of today's episode, we are bringing back the next iteration of the anime Iceberg, the second time we're going to be going into a deep dive into some pretty gnarly shit. So as you might see the subtitle of it, The Lost, The Banned, and The Cancelled, we will give a sort of explanation summary of why those words were chosen as part of the subtitle. We don't really like doing too many disclaimers, but for this particular kind of episode, it's absolutely necessary.
So I would like to sort of emphasize that the Anime Iceberg 1, when we did it, I think like we were pretty happy with the episode, but I was pleasantly surprised with the abundance of reception for it. So Will and I were like, okay, for the next one, do we continue the streak of anime controversies? Do we deviate a bit? And we kind of, juggled a few ideas.
We found a middle ground.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in the end, with these kinds of, as explained in the last Iceberg, controversies tend to make up a bulk of them, simply because people just want to know like the other side of a medium that they've fallen in love with. It's like, oh, you love this actor, but what if you knew there was a dark side to this actor or actress and whatnot? So it's like people are always intrigued of the unknown. Therefore, that's why there's a lot of interest in these kinds of topics. But again, like if we just focus on controversial stuff, we would either run the well dry, or we would be so desensitized that we would just be numb from doing anything other than controversial shit. And that's not the direction we want to go in. We want to try and branch out this iceberg and talk about a wider array of themes, topics, and subjects. So that's why we've, well, at least, for the most part, this was something that was written by me, but also sort of, re-reviewed and discussed with Jason as well. So to go over the subtitle of The Lost, The Banned, and The Cancelled, Lost in this sense is more, again, according to Will's definition within the JP, a series that had adaptations, serializations, or continuations announced, but for one reason or another, it just ended up not coming to fruition. Similarly, series that did get adaptations or continuations announced but fell into obscurity due to licensing agreements, rights mismanagement, publisher issues, whatever, can also be deemed, quote-unquote, lost.
I think for both of us, probably the most prolific one of the lost that we always lament about is planets, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of, especially when it comes to licensing agreements, when you lose that agreement or it becomes in, purgatory due to the company shutting down and no one buying it and stuff, it becomes this odd gray area.
There's a lot of those series actually that have been super popular, but because people just did not get the licensing rights for it. For example, like Baccano. That's another one that is extremely popular, but since I think 2005 or 2006, just you can't find it anywhere because nobody has the rights to broadcast it.
Was it a Technolize? The
Technolize,
serial experiment laying people?
TEXH, however else you spell the rest. Yeah, that one. I think that one, in terms of the English dub, you can find it on Prime, but again,
you see, that's how weird it is, right?
Yeah.
Like it's lost because, yeah. So unless if you get the DVD from ages way back, and good luck trying to find it on Amazon and paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for
those
it.
things are fucking expensive. Moving on to the next word within the subtitle, banned. Pretty straightforward. Series got banned. Now, this could be due to a series of different things, but more often than not, it's usually because of extreme topics in nature. So, extreme violence and gore, criticisms of religion, nations, countries, governments, extreme nudity and sexuality, and, of course, the big bad. I mean, the other ones are pretty bad, too, but, in terms of, like, entertainment media, just straight up racism,
right?
that does exist.
And the other thing I would like to add to the definition of banned is that we are not limiting it to a specific country or Japan banning it. It's sort of it could be a myriad of different countries or religions kind of condemning this property or this creator or whatnot. So that's what we consider banned.
It's not it doesn't have to be a widespread global ban, as long as a country, a group of people, a religion, or whatnot has deemed it not worthy of being broadcasted or online. That would be, in this definition, considered banned. Now, the more difficult to sort of explain is canceled. So that one is just, as the word you might think, a series that either was before, during, or after production, pulled from the air, pulled from the internet, or before anything even happens. They just decide, this project not worth doing. Let's just scrap that shit. So there are a couple caveats to this. So there's a lot of anime and manga series that do get like a cur or a volume adapted, and then of course that's it. Just like the one season, the one volume, and there's nothing else.
The plight of the average, anime watcher, to be honest.
Yeah. So that is usually like, especially when it comes to doing anime adaptations. So you've seen series that have like long running manga runs, but then they might only have just that one season of anime, and that's it, right? Usually, very, very usually, within the production committee, there is always a set time frame and budget in terms of how much time and money is needed to spend on one thing, and then afterwards they can then decide if there would be a second season, third season, a sequel, whatever, right?
It's very rare they do a Shield Hero of like green lighting two seasons back to back right away, right?
Yeah, but there must have been some planning ahead of time for that, right?
Right.
And for series that just get canceled right out is not a great look on the studio, but also the production community, because if you spent so much time and money already planning stuff, because don't forget, before anything even gets animated, you have to pay distributors, you have to pay licensing agreements,
contracts have to be negotiated and signed, takes time, wages,
so
right?
then like once all that sunk cost is calculated and you decide to pull the plug, well, you're not going to recoup any of that.
And I think anime, or like the industry in particular, being predominantly Japanese, has this thing of they rarely cancel, or at least they don't make it very overt.
Yeah.
Because let's take American, TV shows, for example. When they cancel a show, it's publicized, is very public about it. But the Japanese either don't cancel it, or they kind of slip it under the rug to make sure, like, oh, it's been dead for like 3 to 5 years, so all anime fans are like, okay, we kind of get it now. That kind of thing.
So for all intents and purposes, unless there is a sequel that is announced, okay, like asterisk, because there's something that comes up later that will kind of change the definition of this. We should at least assume that the committees commission at least for one current season only. Therefore, like, to not have a sequel doesn't usually mean cancellation. Productions that greenlight a sequel because, but then decide to not do it anymore because the original source, whether it be manga or light novels, aren't as profitable as they might have imagined with the adaptation coming out, also does not count as getting canceled. With manga, it's just straightforward. You either make money for me or you get the fuck out of my office.
Right.
That's essentially it. So the format of this episode will be similar, or it will be exactly the same as the iteration for Iceberg number 1, where we'll be going over the tip, the surface, the darkness, and the abyss, with at least 3 entries for each one. So the way that this was structured was more, I guess, sort of like the overall theme, the background of the story, as opposed to what category it belongs to. So you might have something that is canceled but might be at the tip, whereas something that was lost could be at the abyss. It could be somewhere in between. There really is no correlation between what type of cancellation or ban it got and which category within the iceberg it belongs in.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that, because obviously if another person were to kind of classify all of the stories or controversies that we're talking about, they might say, okay, this should be here and not there. Or why are you saying this is quote unquote more deeper or more severe, whereas this one is not, that kind of thing. This is just a little bit of our classification. It is in no way to sort of say one is lesser than the other. It's just how we kind of put them into like different tiers.
Yep. So with all those definitions out of the way, we have one final one to mention, which is there are going to be certain series that we're not going to be discussing. So particularly series that got like a one cur or series adaptation but never saw a sequel, unless there was a specific reason why there wasn't a sequel that came out. So things like Nana, Land of the Lustrous, Oran High School Host Club, Claymore, etc., 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 will not be featured in this iceberg. However, because of the circumstances behind those ones I just mentioned, they could feature in an iceberg later on, or they might be a different discussion topic that revolves around those particular series, particularly things like Nana, right?
Yeah,
like
I mean, that one's always a very interesting one, especially considering the hiatus and the considerations going towards the circumstances of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Do you want to talk about the trigger warning right now, or do you want to do
Yeah. So, again, with these icebergs, iceberg 2 is no different. There will be a lot of very unpleasant and controversial topics that we would be covering. We are in no way trying to say that, like, for example, the tip or the surface, a story there is anything lesser in terms of severity or legality compared to, something in the abyss, or we're more okay with one than the other. It's just how we classify it. Or maybe how underground it is very subjective. Mm-hmm. But all illegal shit is bad. We don't condone any of this. It's just more of like a morbid curiosity type thing. Like when there's a spider on a dictionary, and then you close the dictionary and you're like, I kind of want to see it.
Yeah. It's definitely that Twilight Zone kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like, it's like, oh, what's on the other side of that door? And it's bad, but curiosity, definitely killed Neko-chan, right?
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing is, again, this is a lot of controversial stuff. Could be very triggering for individuals. So if you either want to skip around or don't want to listen to a portion of it, we totally get it. But brace yourselves, because I don't think that there is not one entry here that, doesn't have a valid, platform for discussion.
Yeah. So obviously, if this is something that is, very triggering, sensitive, or just uncomfortable for you, there are plenty of other episodes from the GAP that you can listen to. Like, for example, if you just listen to maybe the previous episode 90, and if you haven't been watching any of the seasonals that are happening right now, you can always check that out and get caught up on what's going on in summer.
JoJo's pretty dope.
Yep. So without further ado, let's get into Iceberg number 2, starting off at the tip. The first entry we'll be discussing is a renowned studio for both good and bad, Manglobe. And the focus of Manglobe is its bankruptcy and how it ended up killing off series adaptations and continuations for some very, very promising series. So, to give some background on Manglobe, it was a studio that was formed back in February 2002, 22 years ago, by Sunrise producers Shinichiro Kobayashi and Takashi Chiyama. They first got their name out in the open, particularly through Manglobe, by producing some very hard-hitting stuff. I mean, Samurai Champloo.
Shout out to Watanabe, man.
Yeah, Ergo Proxy,
Okay,
Michiko and Hachin. Ergo Proxy was popular, but it's like one of those cult favorite kind of things.
Yeah,
there's a reason why it's still like an 8.01, right?
I mean,
it's
if you listen to like how far back we talked about it. Like there was an episode where we kind of went knee deep into it, and long story short, I think my opinion was it was very pretentious and very slow.
Oh, sorry, it was a 7.90. But that's still.
I mean, that's still extremely respectable.
Extremely. It's definitely good enough to be like talked about as like some people's favorites. I mean, the fact that if you look at like the reviews on my anime list, there's like 173 recommends and only 13 not recommends. So yeah.
And look, it's Sunrise producers. It's Sunrise here. So they're veterans, or like it's from an established studio that is well known within the industry. So it's kind of like vouching for you, you know? That's on your resume.
What is strange, though, is that the three works that I just mentioned, Samurai Champloo, Ergo Proxy, and Michigo and Hatchin, were all original animes. They did not have a manga source, no light novel source, no source at all. It was just wholly original scripts written in-house along with animators and directors that collaborated with them on those productions. So it's not like completely out of ordinary for any studio to work on originals. I mean, we have like 3 Hertz PA Works that do a lot of original anime productions, but to start off your actual studio's limelight by producing 3, yes, 2 of them ended up being, well, one extremely popular, one super popular, but you have to also think that with regards to doing original anime series, it's really hard to get cash flow.
Yeah, and I also think the fact that they're from Sunrise is very weird, because if you think Sunrise, you think Gundam, right? So when you think Gundam, you think merchandise, you think the models, you think, video games, all this expanded profitability, that
money everywhere, right?
That would be good as in like an original manga, because you wouldn't get royalties. Oh no, sorry, original anime. Sorry, because you wouldn't get royalties as like the mangaka, because there is none, unless if you do an adaptation of it, which has happened before.
Yeah.
But usually when it's an original, it's like a big risk, and also where would you get your cash flow from for the long term is very unpredictable.
Yeah. So, trucking along, they start making other series. They start getting adaptations of actual manga and light novel series adapted. But unfortunately, not everything was super rosy. So, one of the biggest busts for the studio was Samurai Flamenco. So in terms of like how badly received it was, how much money they lost making that shit in the first place.
Did you watch it?
No, I didn't.
I didn't either. I just heard it was not okay.
I mean, it was enough to actually put the studio into an extremely tough situation. So, like we mentioned, right? It's hard to make money off an original series, and when they actually started picking up adaptations to do, for example, Deadman Wonderland and Gangsta, which are extremely promising manga series that got anime adaptations. At that point, they already were like in deep waters financially.
Yeah.
Right? So they actually ended up becoming bankrupt in September of 2015. Now, Deadman Wonderland ran from as a manga from 2007 through to 2013, completed 13 volumes, extremely popular, right? So raw manga score of 7.93, which is pretty damn good. It's the popularity that was the one, which is, it's ranked 37.
Fucking crazy, bro.
Because it's I really like it. I really do.
I think Deadman Wonderland, you can read it now on Jump Plus Manga Plus, if I remember correctly.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So the final manga volume sold at least 141,000 copies and was the 20th best-selling series in 2011, which was around the time when manga produced and released the anime adaptation. However, if anybody's watched the Deadman Wonderland anime adaptation, it sucked. It was crap.
So you finished the manga series,
Everything.
And you've also watched the anime, or at least enough of it, right?
I watched enough to know this is not great.
So you can speak to it personally, because I have only heard of the reputation of the anime and the manga, respectively, and not watched or read any of it.
So the way the manga went down was I fully believed it was kind of like a would it be fair to say it was like a Promised Neverland situation? Because Promised Neverland, the first season was pretty faithfully adapted. It was only the second season they decided to just throw the script out the window and screw things up.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, with Promised Neverland, they actually did have material to adapt. They just decided, let's just do original shit for a bit.
Yeah, who knows what happened there? But
who knows?
I mean, it's been covered so much in the JP that there's really no point in talking about Promised Neverland. However tragic that series has gone down.
This is Deadman Wonderland,
Yeah.
though.
So, with the 12 episodes that they released for the solo the solo season that they had, it was just a rush job. They cramped everything into it. They tried to get everything sort of like packed in. I don't know how many volumes.
Yeah,
of
I was about
to
ask when you say,
but
cramped.
It was like, I think they essentially had like character introductions. So you basically you saw everybody within the first 2 episodes, and then there was like a tournament arc, which didn't really happen so soon. And the way they played it out was it was quite long and drawn out in the manga before like things got really, really hectic. They kind of just crushed everything into just those 12 episodes. The quality of the animation was not great either, which is kind of crazy considering that if you looked at how Manglobe did Samurai Champloo, like which was like 10 years before this thing came out. Damn, like it was a real fall from grace. So at that point, the manga had already been done. So there was really no point in trying to get more and more things coming out because they already like sold a fuck ton of, 141,000 copies for its final volume. At the time, pretty good, right? This is pre-Demon Slayer days.
Yeah, and shout out to Demon Slayer too, because obviously the manga is already finished ages ago, and the anime has yet to be completed. Yet it is still massively outselling everyone and everything for years.
Yeah. So onto the other property that they worked on, Gangsta. Now I did watch an episode of it, but unfortunately, when I was watching it, I was only able to watch it with Chinese subs. Because this was on Netflix at the time, and with their licensing agreement, this was like 5-6 years ago. They only had the license to broadcast the anime in Japanese, but with Chinese dubs. So it was okay to watch, but it wasn't necessarily the most comfortable experience for me because my Chinese is nowhere near as good as my English.
I watched Gangsta back in the day.
Yeah, so
and I dropped it.
It was extremely popular, running from January 2011, and it's still running, though unfortunately it's hard to say if it really is still running because the last volume came out back in 2018, but as of Wikipedia, it's still running. It's probably just taking a long time for the next volume to come out. So in terms of stats, the raw manga score is an 8.06, very good, popularity of 229. So with that amount of statistics backing the series, Manglobe would then produce and release an anime adaptation that ran from July 1st, 2015 and September 27th, 2015. Now, whenever I usually mention dates, I usually just say the year or the month, but the fact that I mentioned the day itself, September 27th, is very important because only 2 days later, on September 29th, 2015, Manglobe filed for bankruptcy. Legitimately,
Yikes.
2 days after they released Gangsta, the last episode of it, dunzo. So whilst they were essentially preparing for home video releases of Gangsta, that essentially pushed the release back by like 16 months, over a year. Since then, a lot of the Manglobe staff have now moved on to form Geno Studio in November 19, 2015, and they would also end up picking up an anime film adaptation that Manglobe was working on, Genocidal Organ, which was slated to release in November 13, 2015 under Manglobe. It has released since then, but yeah, this is just something that, for better or for worse, is a model to not follow. Manglobe, as it's hard to talk about Manglobe as like a dud because of the fact that they do still have Samurai Champloo on their resume. But it also just shows that when it comes to running a business, you really do have to have everything in order. You can't just go off and run off on merit where you have people from Sunrise founding the studio. You get your big start by doing Samurai Champloo and you think, oh, like the world is my oyster. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Unfortunately, no. You can do whatever the fuck you want when you have money.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, I was about to clarify that. And I mean, look, we don't know the intricacies and the insider. Like, we obviously don't know any Manglobe staff. But if we just look at it from a statistical or like their, what is it, like the resume, like the studio's resume, it is very clear when they pivot from original works to licensing. And when you are like a studio that probably every project is hanging by a thread in terms of if it's a dud, then you're really in the red. And then they try to, I guess, pivot to licensing. So, like, to claw, like, a safe, more secure kind of paycheck. It's kind of tragic, to be honest.
It also is a really weird thing because a lot of times whenever you do anime originals, it's not... okay, fine. You can find ways to make money for it, but more often than not, it's more used as a resume builder, right? But you already have people that have run the shop at Sunrise, so why is there needs to prove yourself any further? Was it artistic ambition? Was it overly was it over cockiness? Was it just bad planning? We don't know.
I mean, Samurai Champloo and Ergo Proxy, both of these I would consider as very ambitious original anime,
And they both worked. Well, more clear for Samurai Champloo. The verdict's still out for Ergo Proxy, but there's enough people that recommend it, right?
Right. And who knows how much money both of these properties earned in the long run.
Or cost.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really hard to determine in retrospect, especially when you go back to 2015, how much stats or how much, news is there available to us. So it's like we're just kind of shooting in the dark, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Flamingo really kind of screwed them over.
Flamenco screwed
It's
things
like the
up,
red line.
But I think at that...
It's like the red line for Madhouse,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I think at that point, they were already in deep waters. And like Flamenco, they were really depending on it to be a success. And unfortunately, it did not bear any fruit for them. So rest in peace, Manglobe. Rest in peace, Deadman, Wonderland, and Gangsta. Though, if you do care about the mangas, read those, because those are fantastic.
I think the anime for Gangsta, I dropped it halfway through. I just checked 6 out of 12 episodes. And if I remember correctly, it was very much like, what's that Robert Rodriguez movie? A very old, like Once Upon a Time in Mexico or something?
Oh, I thought for a minute you were talking about Battlestar Alita or whatever it was.
Oh, no. It was like, is it Desperado? I can't remember. It's like a guitar case, and then they shoot machine guns.
Oh,
I think,
is it
Salma?
Mariachi?
Maybe?
The poster is literally a guy with a Tommy gun and a guitar case.
Yeah, but the guitar case shoots guns. Shoots bullets, which is pretty crazy. Anyways,
Is that enough for you?
I mean, yeah, that's plenty enough. But the point that I was trying to make is, it has that kind of aesthetic or that kind of rebellious nature, but I think it was also very slow.
Yeah, I remember dropping it after the first episode because of how slow it was. And it's not fair, right? Like, one episode really isn't fair to just drop something immediately, but I think I was just watching too much stuff at that time and I never got around to finishing it. Not to mention, having to watch it with Chinese subs was not the most ideal way of enjoying it for me.
Yeah, and I think one of the characters is mute, so he had to, gesture instead of doing sign language to kind of, dictate.
We know how much Jason loves the sign language.
But
so it's important for some people.
It's
right?
important, but it was just very much like a very typical, two dudes, kind of like, Cowboy Bebop. They're super cool, super suave, and then a damsel in distress comes in between, and they have to figure shit out, save them, because it's Gangsta. Right.
We now leave Manglobe in the dust and move on to the second entry of the tip, where we talk about, this is an anime series that both Jason and I really, really like.
I really like it.
Drifters. So this is a series that ran as a manga from April 2009 to present day, and it had gone some real strong wind in its sails. It was in the first 6 years doing a lot in terms of getting volumes out, getting sales, and that ended up leading it to getting an anime adaptation greenlit, with the production being handled by Hood's Drifters Studio, which is a studio under the Hood's Entertainment name. So the manga itself to this day and the anime still hold really strong metrics on MAL, so both the raw score and the anime are in the 7.8 range, with popularities for the manga being 446 and the anime being 386. So massively popular.
575,000 members for the anime. That's crazy.
Why is it so popular? Well, it's high octane animation. The battle royale plot is super crazy. The fight scenes are amazingly choreographed as well. So just watching throughout that season, where every episode was just fight. It's what you would have wanted. It's basically
Record of Ragnarok.
Yeah, it's Shimatsu Valkyrie. It's Kengan Ashura. It's that. You just want to see people beat each other up. And not to mention, those ones, it's a mixture of both because of the fact that it's amazing choreography, but also using real-life adaptations of historical figures.
Shout out to Joan of Arc, okay?
She's
crazy,
right?
Yeah.
So there was absolutely no reason for this thing to fail. Everybody fucking loved this shit, right? And so, at the end of the 12th episode that aired on December 23rd, 2016, it was announced that there would be a second season of Drifters with the title See You Again, Tokyo 20XX. It's been 8 years now, and nothing's come out.
Wait, isn't there like a couple of OVAs or something?
There were a few OVAs. There were 3 episodes that came out afterwards, but that does not count,
right? Because
those were essentially sort of like bundled into like Blu-ray or DVD releases. But what happened? Why did this shit all of a sudden grind to a halt? Well, as I mentioned with the manga series, it was really, really, really strong in the first 6 years, but after 2016, after that final episode of season 1 ended, only 2 more volumes of the manga have been released. So the mangaka, Koto Hirano, there's been some speculation as to whether this guy is, just not interested in actively writing the manga anymore. He's just disinterested. Maybe he just doesn't care anymore. It should also be noted as well that this Koto Hirano is the same Koto Hirano that has produced loads and loads of different mangas, one of them being Hellsing.
Which is like, Hellsing Ultimate is my top 10 anime of all time. So, and you can definitely see the same style for sure.
Oh, yeah.
In Drifters.
Yeah, despite having different studios, right?
Yeah, and the part where it's kind of hard to blame, I guess, the creator is when you kind of lose inspiration or you're just kind of not feeling it at some point, right? It's kind of hard to force it out mid, as they say, and just be like, well, I mean, it's a tough situation when it's a creative kind of plight, essentially, when you don't really know what to do, or, oh, this other thing is shinier and brighter, so I'm just going to focus on that instead,
I would imagine that he might have also ran into some sort of creative issues in terms of creating more heroes and villains.
I mean, JoJo got into quite a bit of trouble with copyright.
They did manage to find a workaround because Araki is fucking insane.
Right.
But it's also like, for example, you mentioned Record of Ragnarok, right? Where they do actually do things like, reinterpreting Adam, reinterpreting some
Shiva.
Well, yeah. That's another one we can talk about later on.
Buddha, though.
But at the beginning, they mention it's 12 humans versus 12 gods. So there's a finite amount of characters that they will feature in a main character, quote unquote, like kind of capacity. Whereas with Drifters, it just seemed like a Super Smash Brothers. You're just waiting for the DLC and seeing which characters are going to add to the roster and battle it out on new battlegrounds, have new features to show off and stuff. And at that point, like, you either have to try and do your best to end up with a bang, or just keep on adding more and auxiliary shit in there and hope it sticks. And
right.
I think that was probably one of the dilemmas that the creator ran into. We don't know. We never spoke to him. I don't even know him personally. But the other thing that was also really weird about this whole Drifters Hood Drifters studio situation was I did some sleuthing, and I actually looked up the employment records for Hood's Entertainment. According to employment.en/japan.com, Hood's Entertainment was found to only have 4 employees. Mm-hmm. And since then, the studio has not been created for any anime since 2021, leading many to believe that it's either become inactive or defunct. The animation producer Shinya Ueda, who was with the studio between 2014 and 2020, has left and took former Hood staff members, such as the production manager and director Ryo Nakamura, to his new studio, Stable Entertainment. Now, interestingly, Stable Entertainment's studio address is the exact same as Hood Entertainment's headquarters, perhaps indicating that, Hood Entertainment is now defunct and Stable Entertainment has taken over.
So when you think of like, okay, there's only 4 employees at an animation studio, you might at first glance be like, well, 4 people is not a lot of people for an animation studio. And of course, you're correct in assessing that. Not hard to see. But what I would argue is, just like in the video game industry nowadays, there's a lot of contracting work, a lot of outsourcing, such that, okay, 4 is really pushing it in terms of the least amount of people needed for a studio.
Yeah, that's essentially animation director, founder, and 2 other people, and I hope they're not only just the only 2 key animators, because goddamn, like, just to do 1 episode, we watch Shirobako.
Yeah, yeah.
We know how tough it is.
Yeah, and for example, like One Punch Man season 1 being very infamous in terms of how awesome it looked. Like later on, we would find out. I mean, this is heavily publicized that the director and creator of One Punch Man literally had to go around cashing out favors or kind of essentially like recruiting a bunch of ragtag animators, such that season 2, I mean, obviously we knew what happened to it, but it just wouldn't ever be the same because they were all contracted out or sought after by the director and creator themselves. So
this is a messy situation on both sides. On one hand, you have a mangaka who has just not created enough source material to warrant a second season,
and probably doesn't want to.
I mean, as you mentioned, right, they did release a few OVAs afterwards, but that was probably within the 2 extra volumes that they've already done.
I think it's like 4 episodes.
3 episodes.
Oh, okay. My bad.
They were released between 2017 and 2018, December to November. But yeah, that's as much as we've gotten as a second season, quote unquote. So that's one thing. On the other side, you have this really weird corporate situation where, does Hood Entertainment actually exist? Is there who was running the shop there?
When you call it Hood's Drifter Studio, it is very clear to me that, okay, you're doing drifters. So the fact that then it kind of converts into Staple Entertainment kind of tells to me it's like legalese or like
what I think it was
something weird there.
I think that Hood's just basically, and this is purely speculation, but the fact that they handle the production under the Hood's Drifter Studio name, whilst you already have a name of Hood's Entertainment, they put all their eggs into the Drifters basket. And unfortunately, because the mangaka did not have enough source material for them to adapt, the well ran dry. There was just no money to be made in this, right? You can't like go to a production committee and be like, hey, there's 2 volumes. We can definitely try and get the manga to write more stuff. He's a little bit, not into the zone right now, but we promise that maybe somewhere in the next year or 2, we can get some stuff out. No, dude, it's been 8 years and nothing's come out. So obviously, if people decide to back out and not put their money into it, it was a good choice.
Yeah. So it's just another case of tragic situation and circumstances.
Yeah. Now, the final entry into the tip revolves around a very recent news story. So we're going to be talking about 10 Count, the anime that was canceled due to production issues. So we've talked about things that happen in terms of like, delays in animation, having issues in terms of licensing agreements. Like, dude, for example, Uncle Isekai, right? Like, that's a famous one. Nier Automata, anything that was COVID-related at the time, if there was an outbreak, it pushed everything back, and production studios would just be like, oh, I guess we'll just have to wait.
Yeah.
That's it.
Also, even if you didn't have to wait and you can release it now, you probably don't want to, maybe.
Yeah. So, what is this 10 Count, right? So, Jason and I don't really know a whole lot about 10 Count. It's probably because it's a boys love manga, and Jason and I, we don't really get into the BL stuff just because we're not interested in it, not because we have any issues with it.
That being said, though, a lot of BL stuff, especially like if we're talking, because this story is basically in January, right? January 18th, I think, 2024. It says here.
Yeah, but that was the original release for the thing, but then like this story actually came out in 2024.
Right, yeah.
You said 2018.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. 2024, January 18th.
Yeah.
Sorry. So this time it's like nowadays, right? So BL is having a resurgence. You know, was it like Cherry Magic?
What was the one? Sasaki
and Miyano.
Miyano, yeah.
There's a lot of BL stuff in the anime sphere that, in general, I would argue, BLGL doesn't really get a lot of limelight in general.
But the scores on my anime list are fucking insane.
But yeah,
they're really, really good. So you would think that this is probably the time to be releasing BL stuff, right? Because it's getting more and more into the zeitgeist. And this was a very, very popular manga. It ran from January 2013 to November 2017. And 10 Count had been slated for an anime adaptation in 2020, with visuals and teaser videos releasing alongside the announcement. However, later on that year, in December, the staff behind the anime adaptation announced it had been postponed because they were reconsidering the development form of the series.
Very weird wording, by the way.
Yeah. It would then get like a new theatrical release of 2023. So, you think about it, 2020 and 2023, what happened in between? COVID. That was probably a factor in their decision to delay the release of the series.
And I'm assuming theatrical release, so it is not an anime cur, it is a movie.
It could have been either or. We really don't know.
Right.
But what we did know was that they actually also released a staff list, right? So they had Shinosuke Tachibana, Shirotani, as one of the actors. I'll just say the actor and actresses' names, right? So Shinosuke Tachibana, Tomoaki Maeno, and they also had Sotayama as director and screenplay, and Tomomi Shimazaki, who would do character design. Now, it was going to be a co-production between East Fish Studio and Synergy SP. Now, we know Synergy SP. Mm-hmm. We don't know shit about East Fish.
I think it's also important to emphasize that when your staff list is officially announced and also you are acknowledging these studios are co-producing, whether or not you know them or not, that means that the development has got to a certain point, right?
You've already reached out to agencies to procure talent for your show. You must have already paid at least a commission of sorts to be able to use their services. And you're right?
I would argue part of the anime is like in process of being produced. Like it wasn't just, let's start. There was nothing to be made. We're just starting off. No, I would argue at that point you're probably like maybe 30%, 20%. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but
at least you know that the pre-production and the production is already in play.
Money is a lot of money is dumped in right away. Yeah,
so
guaranteed.
2023 seems like things are going to be finally rosy for 10 Count and its fans. No. Earlier this year, January 2024, it was announced the adaptation had been canceled due to issues relating to its production. So, was it just not great? Like, did we decide, you know what, this isn't going to be a profitable thing? Well, it was reported in 2018 that the manga series had sold a consecutive total of 2 million physical copies and ranked number 1 on the National Bookstore's top recommended boys love in 2015 and 2016, came third place in Best Manga in the Sugoi Japan Awards 2017, and for many visitors of the website Nijimen, it was selected as one of the best boys love manga for newcomers to the genre in 2018.
So accolades and popularity is not the issue here.
It just did not make sense for it to get canceled, both from a commercial and a financial standpoint. Now, it is commonplace for anime series to stop production after its initial release to get something outright canceled before anything comes out, but you've already explicitly told us who the studio is, who the actors are, who the director and the character and designer are. That's insane.
Yeah.
Right? So there's been some speculation that because of the 4-year delay with the adaptation lying dormant, investors just got cold. Remember, though, that even if things never get released, animators, producers, agencies, and companies still need to get paid.
Basically, the logical explanation is someone crunched the numbers and was like, okay, if we continue development of the anime, how long and how much will it take? And then they basically was like, nah, it ain't worth it. And then they canceled it, despite kind of being almost a surefire hit in terms of the BL genre for sure, which is, I mean, of all canceled projects, when you have a surefire hit and then you still cancel it due to production issues, it's really like worrying, because you have a banger of the IP, the source, yet you couldn't figure it out in terms of your production style. Not blaming anyone per se, but it's just like, you know, like you had the golden goose, and then for one way or the other, it just didn't work out.
Yeah. It should also be noted that whilst we did mention we know a fair amount about Synergy SP, it's been featured in a lot of our retrospectives, we don't know anything about East Fish Studio. But if you look at its database on My Anime List, they've produced a grand total of 1 kids show, 1 OVA, 2 movies, and 1 season of anime that actually came out earlier this year, a condition called Love.
Which bombed.
Yeah, 6.73 as I just checked.
I thought the manga was okay. I think the manga was okay.
They do have a series coming out in fall 2024 called Tohai. It kind of just looks like Eren Yeager just standing with blue glowing eyes.
Good luck for fall 2024, probably the most stacked time of the year, and this is no different, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Like, we don't know the sort of division of work output between Synergy SP and East Fish Studio, but if you have a manga series that is so highly acclaimed and also making bank, was it the right move to give such a rookie studio to work on this?
I mean, who knows? Maybe, they can be pushed around.
It may also just be the BL angle too, where like honestly, there's not a whole lot of BL, even though there has been a bit of resurgence lately.
Yeah, and maybe it's like, well, even though it is like one of the titans of the BL genre at the time and heavily in demand, there's only so much profit and money that can be made from the genre. I mean, who knows, right? And when you crunch the numbers at that point. But given the BL genre, this is probably as safe of a choice that you can get within that genre in terms of an anime adaptation, right?
And if anything, it's like, why wouldn't we want to have another BL anyway?
Yeah, and Synergy SP, whether like your opinions or our opinions on it or not, is definitely a very well-established studio, such that even if, let's say, for argument's sake, Synergy SP like does like 90% of the work, you can at least be sure that, okay, at least like they are veterans of the industry, that they know roughly how things go, right? Whereas East Fish Studio is like a bit, maybe they're a creator is sort of deviating and trying to establish their own studio or trying to get it off the ground. I mean, maybe it's related to Synergy SP in some ways, so then that's why they're collaborating. I mean, who knows, right? But I also feel like, man, the Synergy SP also deserves some, like, quite a decent amount of blame here. Because if you're like the older brother, right? If you're the senpai of the two studios and you have plenty of anime adaptations under your belt, and you still fucked up production to the point where you have to cancel. It's a big deal in Japanese culture in anime when you have to publicly announce you're canceling a project, right?
And BL has been doing pretty well recently.
Yeah.
I mean, like, look, okay, Twilight, Out of Focus, 7.27, Tadaima Okaeri, Another Boy's Love, that has a 7.78. You also have Cherry Magic, as Jason mentioned. That one's a 7.65.
Well, My New Boss is Goofy earlier.
Is that a BL?
Yeah. I mean, technically, it's kind of like a BL bait. I mean, it's like a Yuri bait, but, you know, for BL, right?
Then you also have like the extremely popular Sasaki Tomiyano.
Given, would you consider BL bait?
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, it literally has the BL tag on it. Right. I mean, there was a movie that came out recently in 2024, the second movie, Hiragi Mix, and that one was a 7.67.
Right. So, and here's the other thing. Well, I don't know if it's possible, but it's like, okay, this falls through, and then you need to recoup your money or whatever, or it's canceled, right? Couldn't you, or as the production committee, sell the IP off to someone else?
I think at this point it's just done. I think also because of the fact that it doesn't help that the manga is completed, right?
Right.
So they probably already have seen like the potential of growth, which probably isn't going to grow anymore since it finished back in 2017. And this might have been just, you know, one last way to be able to make money off of 10 counts.
Right.
So, and I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. Like and also because of the fact that there is a bit more of a plethora of BL coming out as of the last 2 years. I think it's just a missed opportunity for both sides. You could say it was just mismanagement. You could say it was cold feet. In the end, I think also the fact that this is something that only happened this year as well.
Right.
The fact that we've been talking about how meticulous production committees are in terms of giving out money to studios to be able to produce something.
And like what, studios closures everywhere, layoffs are everywhere,
Not
right?
to mention as well that now the studios are coming out of COVID. You would think that people are a little bit more sort of money savvy, a little bit more production savvy in doing
or more
things.
conservative in the choices that they make in terms of projects or funds and burning cash rate, right?
Yeah, we can't say in terms of whether or not we would have enjoyed watching 10 counts, but I think that there was a considerable amount of people that are disappointed that unfortunately 10 count is just not going to happen.
And I know I harp on it, but it really is very rare for a production to get to this point where staff list was announced, where you have studios that you can associate with the project and have it fall through, especially veterans that, I mean, Synergy SP has been around the block, right? So they know how to make an anime on their own even.
Just to give it some statistics to back it up, 7.88 as a raw score on the manga, popularity 288.
Yeah.
That's really high.
So it should have been an easy A plus B equals money.
Yeah.
But I guess whatever happened there must have been something that all of us outsiders are not seeing.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible that like a very hot IP, a very good, a very, experienced studio would have production issues.
Yeah. So the first three of the tip, right? Manglobe, Drifters, 10 Count are classic examples of mismanagement and bad planning. We now move on to the surface, where we start to see things that are a little bit wackier and just also, what the hell were they thinking? We're going to start off the surface with Tokyo Babylon, which makes it into this section because of lawsuits and plagiarism. So, Tokyo Babylon is a classic supernatural fantasy manga that was written and illustrated by Clamp, and it was considered to be one of the most popular manga series of the 90s. So
I love it. And they're doing a re-release right now, by the way. So,
So it received positive critical response from the writers, with the writers from Manga Bookshelf and Mania Entertainment referring to it as one of Clamp's best works based on the social themes it reflected within the main cast, whose traits are developed across the story. So during its 3-year run, a 2-episode OVA would be released alongside the manga, and there would also be a live-action film called Tokyo Babylon /1999 that released in 1993, serving as a quote-unquote sequel at the end of the manga.
So before you go on, Will, this story reminds me a bit of Alice in Borderlands. Because as of right now, right, Alice in Borderlands does have, I think, like a 3-episode OVA anime somewhere located. But obviously, it's more well-known for the 2 seasons on Netflix, right?
Very well-known, yeah.
So it so far reminds me of, and Alice in Borderlands obviously is very well-known as a manga. So it just so far reminds me of Tokyo Babylon and Alice in Borderlands.
You do have the situation, though, with Alice in Borderlands of the 2 different fans, where it's like, people really love the anime, but the manga fans are also like, this has nothing to do with the manga.
Oh, you mean the live action?
Yeah.
Said anime.
Yeah, live action. Like
All good.
There was like a deviation in terms of the way the story was built, but adaptation processes. We talked about this before. So, October 25th, 2020, there was an anime trailer released for Tokyo Babylon, named Tokyo Babylon 2021. It was to be produced by GoHands and originally scheduled to premiere in spring 2021. Majority of its staff had already been announced. However, on the same day, the anime production was accused of plagiarizing outfit designs for its main characters, Subaru Sumeragi and Hakuto Sumeragi. Following an investigation in December 2020, the anime producer officially apologized and announced the designs would be changed, leading to the production committee announcing the series would be delayed. After even more cases of plagiarism surfaced through an internal investigation, the committee announced on March 29, 2021 that the TV series would be canceled and that a new animation studio anime production would be handled by a different studio.
So, I need some clarification here, and I think you would know the answer, which is, it is not Clamp that is being accused of plagiarism, right?
No.
It's GoHands.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the character designer, the costume designer,
right,
whoever it may be, but they were still part of the production staff. So it has nothing to do with Clamp.
Right, because I'm just saying, like, people might misconstrue it as Clamp.
I mean, dude, like, Clamp made this shit back in 1990.
Yeah.
So, like, this is 30 years later.
No, I get it. I get it.
Nothing to do with it. But, of course, to clarify, no. Clamp are not the bad people here. So, fast forward a couple of months. On August 3rd, 2021, even more shit went down because it was reported that Gohan's studio was suing King Records for 450 million yen. Why? Because they accused them of failing to pay expenses they previously agreed to pay. Now, King Records was part of the production committee that was helping to produce this anime.
And King Records is massive of a conglomerate. I would call it a conglomerate, okay?
Yep. So, in the lawsuit, it was revealed that Gohan's the Gohan series was planned to have run for 21 episodes, and according to the same lawsuit, the first 13 episodes had already been completed.
Crazy, bro.
2/3 of your shit has already been done. And all of a sudden, all these lawsuits and claims start flying in, and the committee's just like, no, we're shutting this shit down. We're not going to do anything more.
Such bad blood,
okay,
bro.
Fine. Then I understand it's a bad situation, but hey, we've already done most of the work. Pay us. No. So
where do you fall on this? Because on one hand, look, in my opinion, you should get paid for the work that you do. But on the other hand,
the work that you did was plagiarism.
Yes, exactly. Right? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, ooh, I don't know, man. Or who knows, right? The plagiarism technically is mainly focused on the character designer and designs. So in essence, other aspects of the production seems okay.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest victim of all of this would be Clamp. Because they had nothing to do with this, right? It was their property that they had sold the rights to become adapted into an anime.
Oh, it's 30 years old. Yeah, if they want to do something, sure, go ahead.
But who would have thought that it would be so badly mishandled? Not even mishandled. It was done illegally, right? Like, you could sit on the fence in terms of how illegal plagiarism is, but let's just say that in the community of anime and manga, plagiarism does not fly.
I mean, what was it? Like a couple of years ago, we talked about a manhwa where someone was over-tracing characters and stuff like that. And obviously, our next story after this goes heavily into plagiarism almost as like a selling point. But on terms of Tokyo Babylon, it's like Gohan's is also not the most reputable in terms of project output. Like what they did, the girl, I forgot her glasses. I think they did the cat, was Cat Depressed? What was it called?
The Masterful Cat is Depressed
which
today.
is a really good anime in my opinion.
They also did do Handshakers.
That's the problem. That's my biggest problem with Gohan's. It's like, you did Handshakers, bro.
Yeah.
It's fucking Handshakers, man.
In terms of where I sit on this, it's hard. Hard in the sense that I actually do not know who the biggest culprit is here. Yes, you do have a studio, or at least some of the staff in the studio that have been accused of plagiarism. Whether or not it was full plagiarism or not, we don't know. But the fact that they've come out and apologized is already indicative that something shady had gone down, right? But on the other hand, yes, you did do some naughty stuff. But to also then lose out on 450 million yen as part of a breach of the contractual agreement, I think in the end, like, King Records, as much as like I don't like how certain production committees are put together and how much control some of them have, I don't think King Records really had a whole lot of fault in this either, because they were sold a false promise, right? Yes, 450 million is a lot of money, and they probably should have paid some of the work that they've done. But if you were to tell me that I was going to buy something and then I got the product, but it's not the product I asked for, or it's clearly not the work of the studio that I asked to make, there's a problem there.
I also want to emphasize something. I'm checking up on the anime news article. Gohan's is suing not only for the remaining 281.6 million yen under the contract, but also is asking for 171.82 million yen for episode 14 to 21.
Yeah.
So meaning that even though episodes up to 13 has been done and dusted and ready to go, they're still being like, no, you owe us for the rest of it. Which is kind of ballsy, to be honest. And I don't know how the suit went through.
It's hard, but because, like, okay, so in terms of, like, contractual agreements, I don't know what's written on the fine print, But let's say you're a freelance worker, right? Whether you're an animator, you're an editor, you do something. More often than not, you don't get paid on the work you do. You get paid on the hours you commit to the work. So let's say you agree on a contractual agreement of 10 hours of work. You get everything done in 1 hour. Do you get paid for 1 hour's work, or do you get paid according to the contract agreement of 10 hours? It would be the 10 hours, contractually.
Also quoting the Gohan's lawyer, Tomonori Sugo, claims that the anime production often reference existing designs, but the studio would confirm that there is no copyright infringement issues when comparing the drawn designs with the referenced outfit. However, and this is the biggest however, the person in charge of copyright clearance into production at Gohan's had become unavailable due to a sudden sickness, so the designs in question were not sufficiently vetted.
Yeah.
Bro, what the fuck of an excuse is that?
Yeah, it's the bait and switch.
You want your cake and eat it too.
It's essentially just it's a pig butchering scam is what it is.
Pig butchering?
You know what pig butchering is?
No.
Massive. I mean, okay. Have you ever been called by like an insurance company or like just somebody who texts you? Oh, hey, is this John? No, this is Jason. Oh, sorry. Oh no, I just got into this country. By the way, are you interested in crypto? I'm actually running this massive crypto firm, and then you start pouring money into it, or like one of those romance scams. Those are all forms of pig butchering.
Romance scams is pretty prolific in Hong Kong.
This is not necessarily a pure pig butchering scam, but it's essentially like a bait and switch. It's like you said, hey, like these are all good, but then when you ask why it's good, the person is magically not available to confirm whether it's good or not.
And I would argue that, like at least the majority, I would argue in confidence that of Gohans that they are innocent too.
Yeah, as bad as some of the stuff they've done, I don't think that they're in it to do like illegal shit to make bread.
And they still are producing anime too, so it is not like, oh, this is a freshly established studio just to hoodwink everyone and then call it quits and then like rug pull everyone. No.
Yeah, no, I think it's down to certain individuals who misconstrued the definitions of copyright infringement and decided that they were going to wing it, and then it's FAFO. It's fuck around and find out.
Yeah, or it's like, oh, I don't think it would have been a big deal, and then all of a sudden you fuck around and then everyone found out.
They found out. Yeah.
So,
lesson here: don't plagiarize shit. Even if you think you don't infringe any copyright, like you better have somebody to actually vet your shit before you go out and release it.
And what other better, more appropriate example to go into our next discussion topic, which is about time paradox Ghostwriter.
Right. So in the first example of plagiarism, this is more on a corporate level. This is more on an actual IRL situation. Whereas, let's just talk about this. So, paradox.
We've talked about it before.
Time paradox Ghostwriter. It was an up and coming manga series that was written by Kenji Ichima and illustrated by Zunihiro Date. So it focused on a struggling manga artist, Teppei Sasaki, who wished to become serialized at Weekly Shonen Jump. Ah, okay. So what happens? Well, as many mangakas experience, many years of failure follows, and then they decide that you know what, like I'm just gonna give myself 1 more year, 2 more years, however many years, and after that I'm done. Until suddenly lightning strikes and some real crazy Steins Gate shit happens where his microwave and freezer melt together and spew a magical Shonen Jump magazine that is from 10 years in the future. Yeah, that's the plot. Then Teppei decides then to open it up and realizes, yo, this shit is pop. This busting, dude. This is bang shit, dude.
Yeah, and I've watched Back to the Future 2 before, so I know what to do with this.
They clearly didn't because, well, I'll get into that later.
Yeah.
I'll get into it later. So what does he do? Well, hey, this is 10 years in the future. It's like, what would you do if you went back in time? Oh, I would write down all the lottery numbers, or I would know like when
which
to buy
stock. Yeah,
I would buy Apple stocks. No, that. Oh, I will buy property in this year. Like that kind of shit. That's what he decided to do. This was his golden egg. So he decides to plagiarize and copy his shit as a one shot, and then immediately the heads at WSJ, fiction, not the real one, because it's still within the manga,
right,
says, hey, look, let's get this serialized. Done.
Oh, wow, it's really good.
Meanwhile, there is another aspiring manga artist who comes upon that issue of Shonen Jump, the one that was serialized with the guy's one shot, and realizes,
something ain't right.
And the jig is up.
Long story short, I mean, I don't know if we should spoil that part, right? But I guess
who cares? It's canceled now.
So basically, this other aspiring manga artist that was like, something ain't right here, is because, was it she? I think it was a she.
It's a she.
Her work is essentially, or like the stuff that she was planning, is essentially being plagiarized by our main male character, and she's like, how the fuck would you know that? Because I planned it ahead or something like that.
Yep. So
thus, the jig is up.
Yep. So things seem to be going pretty well
for the manga
until August 2020, when the manga suddenly ended in Weekly Shonen Jump issue 39, officially ending the series on 2 volumes, which totaled 14 chapters. So whilst the premise was as risky as it was, it could have been super interesting. It was met with massive negative reviews from fans, claiming that it was either badly paced or the characters are boring, and also they didn't really know how to work with that time paradox, time machine, like time travel kind of thing.
Yep.
It just seemed that for many, they felt that the mangaka was too dependent on the premise of the manga and hoped to use it as a crux to build the whole story. But, with time paradox and travel stories, you need to have a lot of planning involved. And like you mentioned earlier about how maybe they did the Back to the Future, clearly that person didn't watch enough time travel shit because it just did not stick. But I think that the main discontent for the manga came from the fact that the core focus of the manga was plagiarism.
Okay. Now, the way I see Time Paradox Ghostwriter is very conflicted. Because on one hand, I think the meta premise of WSJ referencing WSJ in the manga,
and also serializing a clearly plagiarized manga in its issues as well,
is, I think, a very cool meta concept.
Exactly. I think that as a story, it would have been really cool to explore.
Yeah, and in theory, right, if you're WSJ, you are serializing this, so in theory, the editors can go around to other creators being like, yo, there's this kind of manga that we're serializing. Could we kind of do a parody off of your work? Oh, you're under the WSJ umbrella, so you have to say yes. Tough luck, or something like that, or negotiate something.
It's a really weird situation, though, because all this plagiarism that's happening is purely fictional.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like the Tokyo Babylon situation. It's not like that other that isekai that we mentioned before, where they just basically plagiarize like all the characters from different isekais.
Oh, right, like Sword Art Online.
Yeah.
And the one that is tasked with murdering all of the isekai characters because they're evil council or something, right?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, that's the one.
The Kagegurui guy. That's the property that we're talking about.
Yeah. So those are actual like instances of alleged plagiarism.
Well, with the Kagegurui one, it's less of the plagiarism, which is very overt, right? It's more of like an homage, but then people don't like it when you think that Kirito
is a piece of shit,
or like Ainzun Ghoul is like the big bad.
Yeah, but I think still the core focus of it is you're taking someone's idea and making it your own,
for sure,
right?
Without permission.
And here it's a bit weird because no actual plagiarism went down,
even though the premise of the property is about plagiarism.
Yeah.
And everyone's in on it, too. WSJ is in on it. because they are
they serialize this shit, right?
and they even put their own WSJ into the manga, right?
Like you mentioned, the meta of it, right? A fictional WSJ serializing a fictional plagiarized manga
From the future.
which is actually in real life with WSJ serializing a manga that is about plagiarism.
Yeah,
it's
essentially
it's just how deep does this fucking endless rabbit hole go? You know?
Essentially, they're giving them their blessing. And in my opinion, it's extremely doable. In fact, it's almost like Deadpool-esque, right?
It's definitely got the potential to create a story where like you do want to question like, okay, well, what is the validity of copying someone's works and making it your own? I mean, we're still in the AI discussion as well, right?
And furthermore, it's kind of like, okay, at what point does the stakes become too high to plagiarize? Because you essentially, the main male character, is a fraud because you are relying on a future edition 10 years down the line to dictate your success rather than it being coming from you because you're copying it word for word.
Yeah. I think
panel by panel.
What it is though is just the fans it just did not fly with them. That was the main thing. And the fact that it was, I don't know if it was boycotted or not, but in the end, because of how bad things were, the mangaka actually ended up having to shut down their social media because of all the negative shit that they were getting. So it got bad. Like it was like a fictional plagiarism situation that had IRL consequences.
Yeah, or it's like, hey, you're promoting an act that is really ethically, morally uncool in the space.
Again, though, it's hard because it's like you're doing it for like artistic purposes, but I think it's because of the fact that they also were making money off of it too. It was just it did not sit well with a lot of fans.
Will, here's my hot take. If it was a really good manga, no one would have, I mean, it would have gone bad publicity either way, but if it was like a good story, I think it would have been okay. Like it would have skirted the line, but it would have been fine.
It probably would have ended at some point still, but like I feel like it would definitely have gone beyond the 2 volumes. I think it was just in the end, it was a bad story. It was badly executed on a very promising premise, and that's why we just don't see Time Paradox Ghostwriters anymore. We're going to speed things up a little bit because we're actually not running over time, but we are, this is going to be a long episode. We're going to round off the first half as well as the final entry into the surface with one of the more interesting discussions within the big 3. We're talking about
It's
Toriko.
just Big Me, right?
Yeah, Big Me. Toriko. Now, I don't know if many people know much about Toriko now, but if you actually look on like r/anime, they even have its own Toriko subreddit. Toriko is a very, very well-known and very, very popular action gourmet adventure manga series. That's
Just think of orange jumpsuit, blue hair, and then if you know what I'm talking about, that is Toriko.
Yep. So it was written by Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro, and it ran for 8 years between 2008 and 2016. It was dubbed the gourmet version of One Piece, given the premise revolves around the titular character Toriko being a gourmet hunter with superhuman strength and knowledge, searching for the most precious foods around the world so he can create the ultimate full-course meal.
I would even argue it's more like Monster Hunter. As someone who played a lot of Monster Hunter,
yeah, both, right? So there was definitely a lot of hype. Reportedly, as of August 2023, there are over 30 million copies in circulation, and it was also a launch title for Weekly Shonen Jump's digital successor. So the series would get an anime adaptation produced by Toei Animation between 2011 and 2014. This was around the time when Bleach had ended its original run in 2012. Due to the fact that Pierrot was reportedly suffering losses after failing to attract enough viewership. And it became well known that after the Eisen arc, the series started to get boring. It was filled with fillers and really boring, redundant story arcs.
Well, at least Thousand Year Blood War seems to be doing pretty good nowadays. Yeah. So at least there's that, right? For Bleach fans.
Yeah, that's a discussion we'll sort of circle back to later as well, right? So, because of the initial downfall of Bleach, this seemed to be the one, the first instance of the fall of the big three, but also an opportunity for WSJ to replace Bleach with Toriko as one of the big three. So the hype was immense at that point. There was a short film series that was created by UFO Table of all studios for the Jump Super Anime Tour 2009 and 2010. So there were 2 short films they made. They even had like huge collaborations with One Piece and Dragon Ball Z. So there was like a crossover with One Piece that was sent out free for annual WSJ subscribers. The 2 creators of both sides created a crossover one shot called Taste of the Devil Fruits. There was a 3D anime film that was released as part of a double feature with the One Piece 3D film. The anime took over Dragon Ball Kai's Dream 9 time slot at the time, airing right before One Piece. So like, hey,
everyone's
feature,
eyeballs, right?
Right. There's a crossover special between Toriko and One Piece, considered episode 1 of Toriko and episode 492 of One Piece, as it aired as a series premiere. There's another one which was a 2-series airing for episodes 51 of Toriko and episodes 542 of One Piece. There's a 2-part hour-long crossover between Dragon Ball Toriko and One Piece, referred to as Dream 9 Toriko and One Piece and Dragon Ball Z Super Collaboration Special. And then, of course, Bandai Namco estimated that Toriko itself would be able to bring over $25 million in toy sales for the 2012 fiscal year.
So one thing I would. So obviously, no shit, Sherlock. Weekly Shonen Jump is really pushing Toriko. Like, it's very clear, right? To get it collaborating with Dragon Ball Z and One Piece, and you can kind of see the audience that at least they're trying to cater towards, right? But the other thing that also I think is a little bit underneath the surface is they are essentially saying Toriko, One Piece, and Dragon Ball Z are like equivalent or like mutual, like at the same level even. You could argue one way or the other, right?
Or it could just be using the pull of those 2 series to try and push Toriko on the same pedestal, yeah.
But at the very least, it's like, okay, we're acknowledging or trying to acknowledge that Toriko is at least at the same tier or roughly the same tier as these other 2 crazy major properties. Mm-hmm. Like they're lifting it up to say this is a statement by Weekly Shonen Jump. So what could go wrong, Will?
Yeah, well, despite all the hype and backing from WSJ to push the series to the top, Toriko was actually losing money. Whilst it was popular in Japan, Japanese fans started to get tired of it, and fans abroad, particularly English-speaking and English-reading fans, just didn't really buy any of the volumes. And around this time as well, Jump was going on a crazy rampage and canceling shit tons of series to make it to make Toriko one of the big 3. But by reducing their catalog and also finding that the Toriko was not going to be the cash cow they would hope for it to be, eventually they just reduced it to going back to top selling manga lists between like behind. It was just it fell behind ecchi and sports titles because of disinterest, and it ended up leading the series to be rushed for the ending, and then I wouldn't say canceled. It just ended in 2016.
Discontinued, right?
Yeah, just nothing there.
I would argue definitely in the West, at least from my personal experience, no one gave a shit or even knows of Toriko. Like, no one knows what that is.
No.
In general, like, we would only know Will because like we are living in Asia, so we might know a little bit, but even then everyone doesn't even know what Toriko is in general.
You grew up in Hong Kong in the 2000s and the 2010s, right? Like, I never saw any Toriko shit on,
I remember a book cover once of him like sitting on top of like a lizard with like the Castlevania kind of like meat, with the bones sticking out, and then like this weird like cylindrical meat in the middle, and I was like, huh.
The classic anime depiction of what meat looks like.
Yeah. And I was just like, huh.
But it's always like, it was always Naruto. It was always One Piece. It was always Dragon Ball Z. It was always Sailor Moon, Bleach, those things, right? Not much Toriko. So I think that like it was another one of those cases of, I hate to say it because it sounds
Wait,
really...
what toys can Toriko even do?
Merch. Like just figures,
I guess. Okay.
If they sold frying pans, I would have bought one.
Sure, yeah.
But I think it was just kind of those things where it's like us first before them, where it was like it's hugely popular in Japan, so that's what we're going to do. Doesn't matter how good it does overseas. The problem was Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Bleach, and Sailor Moon. All those things massively popular overseas.
Yeah.
Hugely popular. And that's why they were still mainstays even after original Naruto ended. Even after original Bleach ended. The fact that you still get Boruto stuff, the fact that you still get Thousand Year Blood War,
the
One
fact
Piece
that
is
you
still
go
running
to
strong.
any Western, anime convention and
Sailor
they all
Moon had a revival in 2015 with Crystal.
Yep.
Right? Dragon Ball Z, they just released like a new season of it. So
Do you think it's a little bit because they were trying super hard to stuff it down everyone's throat and being like, no, you need to like this?
I think it was also just coupled with the fact that the sales for Bleach were dropping too. So they needed to find a replacement as soon as possible. But that 4-year experiment failed, and now, luckily for them, Bleach is back in the fold. But for how long? Because I don't know. I mean, yes, it's a 1,000-year blood war, but like IRL, I don't know how long that's going to be. Right?
I mean, it's also over too, technically, the manga.
Yeah, exactly. Rest in peace, Toriko. I know it's super popular among some fans, but maybe if you had figured out how to make it super popular overseas first, then tried to push it, then maybe something could have happened. But yeah, that rounds up the first half of today's discussion. We are on the hour and 20-minute mark. That's fine. I mean,
right.
don't forget our disclaimer took around 15 minutes earlier as well.
No, that's all good. And the heavy shit is after the break, where Will and I will go into the abyss, into the darkness to find the lost, the banned, and the canceled shows that you might want to know a little bit more of after the break.
Yeah, catch you all later. We're back for the second half of today's discussion of the Good Anime Palette podcast. Still on the Iceberg, the second version of it. So, Jason and I have talked about a lot of legal issues, laziness from mangakas, mismanagement from production committees and studios,
plagiarism.
Yeah, now we're going into some some more fucked up shit. So. We're now venturing into the darkness, and we do need to give our first content warning because a lot of the stuff, in fact, not even just the darkness, all the way down to the abyss is going to be some very sensitive and controversial shit. So
playtime is over.
Yeah. So we've done this before with our previous Iceberg. We've done this before with a few other episodes. If you are triggered, if you are uncomfortable with regards to some of the topics that we'll be covering for the second half, you're more than welcome to tune off and log on to a different episode. So, be warned, there is going to be some really gnarly shit.
Okay.
You have been warned. So, we're going to kick off the first entry into the darkness. Get Schooled. Now, most people probably don't know about Get Schooled because it's not a manga, it's not an anime. It's in fact a manhwa. It was a popular Korean webcomic that was published on Line's webtoon platform. Set in South Korea, the premise of Get Schooled revolves around juvenile delinquency being so bad that the government passes a law that empowers government agents to visit problematic schools and quote unquote deal with the problem. So, in terms of high school delinquency, we've seen a lot of these. Like Windbreaker just recently, the very, very popular Tokyo Revengers.
I mean, if we go by crazy controversial Battle Royale, right? Yeah. It's delinquency, technically. But even in the very extreme sense, right? I would argue, right?
Yes. I think that there's a focus other aspects of the series, but yes, as a core, that does exist.
Wait, what was that? Is it Thai show where it's is it Trise?
Oh, Trece. I thought that was Filipino.
Is it Filipino?
No, I think it's Mexican, actually.
I'm super sorry if
not even. Okay.
Is it Thai? No.
It's a Singaporean anime-influenced television based on the Filipino comic series of the same name. So that's what
I
it
see.
Is. So it's Filipino, not Mexican. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. So but isn't that the premise of getting revenge?
I didn't watch Tresse, but I mean,
Which one was the one that's like getting revenge on like bullies and stuff? Okay, never mind. Okay, anyways, Will,
not related to this.
I'm
here.
getting schooled over here. Okay, Will,
Yeah.
continue.
So we've already mentioned, right? Not a crazy premise to talk about delinquency in general, but this particular series got into some real hot water in September 2023 when Webtoon abruptly canceled the English publication of the series due to alleged racism. Yes, there was some really, really uncouth, really disgusting portrayals of multi-ethnic characters. Now, as the English publication was canceled, the Korean version would be placed on indefinite hiatus whilst officials conducted an internal review. Webtoon announced, quote unquote, it should never have been published, and we deeply apologize to anyone who encountered it. Racism or racist content have no place on Webtoon. The episode, or the chapter, because of the Webtoon format, in question is episode 125, which included a controversial scene wherein a student of Korean and Ethiopian descent taunted his Korean-American teacher with a racial slur. In response, the teacher similarly insulted the multiracial student with another derogatory term. Now, I was trying my best to sort of put words on paper to explain the situation, but I'm going to refer to a Reddit post that was written by user Jumanji-Joestar, who put it best. I don't think I need to explain why this is so problematic. Having one of the heroes of your story throw a racial slur at a villain and justifying it like it's some righteous moment because said villain is a bully. It's even worse because Daniel, one of the characters, is blonde-haired, blue-eyed, half-Caucasian with a very attractive face, in contrast to Lee, who is very cartoonish. This shit legitimately looks like something a white supremacist would write. I cannot stress this enough. This is literally the first time this webtoon has ever featured a black character, and he almost immediately gets called the N-word, and it's treated as a righteous moment. I'm baffled that this shit even made it past the editorial team. The backlash to this arc from Western audiences was so strong that it literally got the story removed from the English version of Webtoon, and apparently it's on hiatus even on the Korean side. The authors even had to release an apology, like, oh, we're so sorry, we didn't realize using racial slurs for shock value was bad, blah, blah, blah. So, we know that there have been some certain situations where manhwas, webtoons have had problems, like for example Soul Leveling with its geopolitical reasons, Lookism with its body image dysmorphia thing. Both of them would end up getting anime adaptations, but this
I hated Lookism. It was just really, I know it's popular, but man, I didn't like the anime one bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, still got an anime, right?
Oh no, for sure, right? It's still past.
It still definitely did not.
It's still past production.
Yeah,
okay,
it did not get flagged for racism, completely overt racism as well.
Yeah,
and so this is something that I am very puzzled by, because if it got up to 125 chapters / episodes for fans to realize what was going on, what the fuck was happening with the previous 124 episodes?
Maybe they just didn't push the envelope or didn't push the line far enough for it to cause problems.
Allegedly, it seemed that there was also other issues of insane bullying, sexism, discrimination, but I guess those were not enough until somebody decided to say the N-word.
Now, to be clear, bullying in Asia, particularly in Korea and Japan, I mean, also in other places too, but I mean, let's focus on the Korea and Japan part, is particularly heinous and toxic.
The fact that there are so many Korean dramas focused on high school bullying and so many delinquency anime and manga series in Japan,
like it's genuinely a really bad problem.
It's a really bad sociocultural problem for sure.
And like,
and I don't know how much it exists now, but the fact that there was a lot of like bullying counterculture shit that happened in the 90s and 80s in Japan, and I'm sure that also like somewhat reflected in Korea as well.
I mean, there are some controversies in Korea. I know, like I like watch some true crime kind of documentaries. Like some Korean kids really go out of their way. I mean, I'm not just singling out Korea in particular, but I'm just saying as an example, some of them really go fucking crazy.
I think that it's also down to like face, right?
Yeah.
The face culture in Asia, but
Or the elitism.
But
right?
I don't think any of that plays any effect in what the fuck was going on with Get Schooled.
And that's why I'm also equally as puzzled, right? Because you can say the bullying is brutal. You could say it is like a big, social, economic issue in these societies. Or you could even say racism is still very prominent in certain areas, which it is, by the way.
Yeah, we're not turning a blind eye on that. Like, as much as we want to stamp it out, like we can't be the only ones trying to fight this fight.
And to also not say that, it's been solved. Of course it's not been solved. It will always be an issue in every society from here on out and since the dawn of time. But to go to that length, man, at what point do you go like, oh yeah, this will fly. This will be good.
I'm more thinking of what the fuck were they trying to achieve with that?
No, because it got published, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, in my opinion, it went through certain rounds of fact-checking, vetting.
Some fucking editor in chief at Webtoon was like,
oh yeah, it checks out.
this is fine. Let's go ahead. Oh, N-word? It's okay. No, what the fuck what are you thinking?
Look, even if, right, and this is the biggest benefit of the doubt, even if you think that the usage in that instance is justified, I would argue, right, as a company, as someone who is working at Webtoons, should look at that and kind of raise questions as to do you really have to go to that length to illustrate the struggles or the conflict, right?
Or whatever point you're trying to make.
Yeah, you can do a lot of heinous, exhibit of heinous behavior or unjust behavior without going to that length.
That's why you have movies like Get Out or 12 Years a Slave, where they talk about real racial prejudices and injustices. But those movies are lauded because they are a real-life depiction of what the fuck was going on at the time, or what kind of social, cultural issues characters in Get Out would experience.
Look, and I'm also not saying, for example, you can't write good female characters if you are a guy, for example, right? Or write good LGBT
as a straight or as a cis straight person, right?
Yeah, or can't appreciate it if you are not into the same gender, right? However, it's at a certain point, you can't also then wave the flag of, oh, I'm advocating for this issue, and very casually just, I
don't even think they're trying to advocate this issue.
And that to me is also another problem, because if you advocate it or trying to make a point,
you failed massively.
Yeah,
it's if you're going for shock value.
Yeah, exactly, right? What?
What was the end game here, right?
Well, to end publication, I guess.
What kind of fucking racist Hail Mary were you going for here?
Yeah, and look, anime, manga, manhwa, webtoons, there is a lot of controversial shit, obviously, as we will go later down this episode. However, this is the most why did you need to do that?
Yeah. This was easily one of the most preventable things. The fact that as fucked up as some of the things they had done in the previous 124 episodes / chapters they had done, it still got 124.
Yeah, so apparently everyone was okay with the other stuff before it, right?
Or accepting of it.
Right. Or hey, maybe you're just being, very controversial and fringe, but okay, cool.
This is not even a case of being edgy, right? This is just plain stupidity.
You're over the edge. You're
done.
Yeah.
What you had nothing to gain from doing this and everything to lose. And now you've lost everything.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. All of it.
Yeah, it also seemed that according to some subredditor, some redditors on various subreddits, it felt like it was also one of those half-assed apologies. It's one of those I got caught for something and so I have to apologize.
And that just looks real bad, man. If you're not sorry or you don't
realize what the problem is, right?
That's an issue, bro. You already made your mistake, and the fact that you are not genuine is not gonna fly. Period.
Moral of the story, don't be fucking racist, dude. That's it.
A moral of the story, just don't... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just gonna literally say the same thing, and I realized you just said it moments ago. Yeah.
Yeah, like I can see there's a world where people might try and bend the definitions of racial representation and discrimination, but this is not it, son. This is not the way that you want to be trying to tackle social issues by just straight up making a character call another character the N-word.
So here's the part that I'm trying to figure out. So they're trying to deal with the problem, as in the premise of the story, right?
Yeah.
They're delinquents, and then there are people like the governments that deal with the problem.
Imagine like prison school, but instead of well-endowed women, you just have neo-Nazis and racists and shit.
So the whole premise of Get Schooled is about racism, right? Or is it?
I don't think it's about racism. I think it's just delinquency. I think it's just that they pushed certain things too far.
So basically, they decided to tackle, quote unquote, the issue or the instance of racism, and the other 124 either alludes to it or focuses on some other delinquent type shit, right? Basically,
there is, I guess, some way of not defending it, but sort of explaining why maybe they did it. Like, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies.
Well, yeah, of course.
And you must
no,
have watched...
yeah,
We're talking about Django here.
Yes, Django Unchained. We're also talking about Quentin Tarantino himself with certain films.
Yeah.
Like him as an actor, not him as a director and writer.
Whilst we can give shit to Get Schooled, why is it then that, he gets a pass with Django? And I think that one thing was... And this was actually a very enlightening interview from Jamie Foxx, who played the titular character, where he explains that he actually wanted...
Oh, with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah.
He
wanted DiCaprio to call him the N-word because this was not just an instance of just pure racism. This was a pure reflection of the times to be living as a black person under rule of white people.
I mean, on a more lighthearted note, Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder, right? And why are we okay with that? And I am okay with that, but
many actors alongside him as well, when they were doing Tropic Thunder of black descent, of African descent, they're also like, we're totally cool with it.
Yeah.
So I think those instances, there are reasons to the madness. Whereas with this one, it just seems straight up like,
it just seems
I want to use the N-word and I want to see what happens.
It's just reckless. It's just stupid, reckless bullshit.
Yep, and it fully deserves to be canceled. Moving on to the next one. To all the Dragon Ball Z fans anywhere,
here we go.
Yeah, y'all had this coming. So, Dragon Ball is a long-running franchise that has spanned many, many iterations from Dragon Ball original to Dragon Ball Z, Super, Kai, whatever the fuck Dragon Ball is now. I think those are the main four. I don't know any other ones.
I haven't followed it in ever.
I think Dragon Ball Kai is the most recent one. So yeah, I don't think I need to further explain what Dragon Ball is, but Dragon Ball Super, which is the fifth anime series of the franchise, had already been out for several years after its initial run from 2015 to 2018. However, there was one country in particular that did not take kindly to the series during an ongoing debate concerning a still controversial character, Master Roshi. Now, the country of Argentina, their Department of Communication of Buenos Aires released a statement shortly after an episode aired that leads into the Tournament of Power, where Master Roshi took on a very odd training session. In this episode, Roshi recruited Puar, who is a weird shape-shifting animal, to transform into a young woman. This is so Roshi could overcome his weakness of, quote-unquote, being too perverted for his own good. By the end of the training, Roshi says he has overcome the need to sexualize women, but only on the battlefield. Now, of course, with that fucking plot line, a lot of people were very, very uncomfortable with it, especially when, in that episode, Roshi faces a female character, Kawe, who uses quote-unquote seduction techniques to distract her opponents and make them lower their guard. He would immediately fall for it, so he decides to quote-unquote punish her by tricking her into believing he's lost control of himself and he's about to sexually assault her. Yes, this really does happen in that episode. episode, scaring her so much that she abandons the battlefield in tears so that he can defeat her without having to actually, quote unquote, hit a woman. No shit, the Department of Public Defense was sent a complaint by the Ministry of Women, Gender Politics, and Sexual Diversity, with executives officially accusing Roshi of engaging in sexual abuse. Since then, Cartoon Network and Warner Media have pulled Dragon Ball Super from the air in Buenos Aires and much of Argentina. Now, we've watched or we know enough about Dragon Ball as a whole, and we also know a lot of its characters, particularly Master Roshi. And let's be frank, the depictions of his antics have always been controversial.
Yes.
I
I remember watching Dragon Ball Z on VHS, and yes, it was already, he is of the in Guangdonghua we call 金魚佬, kind of like perverted, old geezer, bald kind of, but he's really good at, what was it, like the martial arts or whatever you call it,
whatever it is. Now, this is in no way to slate Dragon Ball as a whole, nor is it in a way to slate the creator,
rest in peace.
Akira Toriyama. Now, because his original works have been running for 11 years between 1984 through to 1995, and he did have a lot of involvement with the animated series that came along with it. So, like Dragon Ball, Z, GT, Z Kai, Super Dragon Ball Heroes, and so on and so on. I think there's a new one called Dragon Ball Daima that's coming out. So Kai wasn't the most recent.
Yeah, you have to forgive us, listeners, because Will and I are not really like Dragon. I mean, we know of it. We've definitely watched a lot, like a decent amount of it, but we're not like super into it. Nothing against people who are. It's just, it's a long running series, bro.
Yep. So with this particular instance, however, I think it's very clear that the content of that particular episode is extremely troubling, and I think that they've kind of watered down Master Roshi's character since then, because let's be real, like, especially when you try and push that kind of shit in today's times, like, ooh.
So this is the part where I'm like, I don't really know what to do, because okay, the safest situation or option is to not have such a character with such an archetype trope, right? Yep. That's like, because then it's not even in the equation. Okay, this character has been far established eons ago and is known to be of this kind of mannerism, right?
You've also had characters from other series, especially male characters, that are of the more, lack of a better word, gropey nature.
Or misogynists, right? So it is not the first nor the last to have these kinds of themes. I do think, though, you need to also be cognizant and aware of certain tendencies. I mean, I guess like Master Roshi having that archetype doesn't mean that you have to go all the way. Just like with, the Get Schooled. You don't have to go all the way to show instances of a certain characteristic or a certain trait of a character.
There are loads of TV series, whether animated or IRL, like live action, that feature very, very questionable, even controversial scenes of a sexual nature.
And Game of Thrones, for example, very, very beloved by a lot of people, contains a lot of really fucked up shit.
But I don't think at any point there's any sort of promotion of what they're doing and saying that, like, it's okay because this is the time and, like, of the people. Well, first of all, Game of Thrones is completely fictional. You can't pinpoint it to, like, Arthurian culture, or you can't like, say it's feudal or whatnot, right? Like, there's no point of comparison there. But they also don't say, like, oh, the R word is completely fine,
or they're not like glorifying it. They're merely like showing it, I guess, and then having you be the judge, right?
And I think this is also part of why there is, I guess, sort of like, let's be real, there is a level of toxicity to be within the Dragon Ball fandom. As many other fandoms do have a certain level of toxicity as well, but I think that, like, whenever we talk about toxic fan bases, there tends to be a discussion about Dragon Ball more often than not, and this particular character does not help their case. I think that, yes, there is sort of like an appreciation for sexual / toilet humor, right? Like, you have things like South Park and Family Guy on the American side that kind of go into those things. Not even kind of, like very much into those things. But it's done to a point where it's meticulously satirical that even if it is offensive, and don't get me wrong, these series have also been called to be canceled too, right? South Park, many times. Family Guy, many times. But there is enough people to back it and also construe a positive light on how it's portrayed that it hasn't been taken off the air. With Master Roshi and the whole discussion about his engagement in really risque, dangerous shit, I think it's pretty well founded for people to be upset by it. Enough to the point where people are now going out and saying, take this shit off the air. And it succeeded in Argentina. We don't know if this is going to happen again in other countries or other cities.
Look, all I have to say is, if we, and this is again the biggest benefit of the doubt, were to exclude like the social ramifications, let's say, of the character, right? Let's just talk about the work as it is on its own, which is a big benefit of the doubt, right? What point are you trying to make with the character's actions? Like from the storyline standpoint, a character development standpoint, what use is the plot that Will described to you, dear listeners? In my opinion, it contributes nothing.
Well, the argument there, and I'm not making the argument, but it is well known, Master Roshi's always been like this.
Yes, that is true. As in, like, there's a tendency, and that's his archetype. But you as the creator, or you as, like...
Anybody involved in Dragon Ball, right?
You have the control, and you also are a person that is living in modern society to know the social implications in terms of within the cultural zeitgeist. So if you don't think that's a big deal, well, you fuck around, you're getting ready to find out why you might want to not do that.
Moving on to the last entry of the darkness tier, we have a very, very, one of the most popular manga series of all time, Kinnikuman, which is a wrestling series that initially ran from 1979 through to 1987. So if you're familiar with the guy, big muscled wrestling gear, weird fin over his head, big fish lips, that's the manga series we're talking about.
Also has a Netflix series.
Yep, and it also has a continued run from 2011 to present times. So wildly popular. Reported as of 2021 that it had sold over 77 million copies, along with having several anime and film series. So overall, the series has received widespread acclaim. However, the controversy, similar to the Dragon Ball Super controversy, revolves around one particular character by the name of Brocken Jr. So initially, he's one of those. It's one of those archetypal antagonist turned team member kind of characters, right? So he essentially joins as an ally within the Kinnikuman lineup. But it wasn't so much his character arc that led to the controversy. It was more about the depiction of the character himself. So when the character of Brocken Jr. is introduced into the series, the character, I shit you not, is dressed in full Nazi uniform, which was given to him by his father. In the series, he's deemed to be a good Nazi because of the fact that he does not hold the same methodologies and principles of Nazism. However, just because you say good Nazi does not discount the fact that the word Nazi is there. And that word itself...
And doesn't mean that everyone else is good with it.
Yeah, it's got a lot of problematic connotations across many countries, in particular with France due to its historical occupation by Nazi forces. Similarly, when the series decided to bring their toy line over to America, Brocken Jr. was noticeably absent from the selection of figurines and was eliminated from the tie-in Nintendo game and replaced with a different character. In later issues of the manga, his swastikas were removed due to Japan's increasing cultural sensitivity. And not surprisingly, any episodes that depicted the character were removed from broadcasting in France. So, of the original 109 anime episodes that would have aired, only 49 of them actually aired in France. So, more than half of their shit was wiped out. Why? Because
it's obvious.
Because Nazis are not good, man. You can't just say good Nazi and like make us feel that it's completely okay to do. There are loads of movies and TV series that focus on the Second World War, that focus on imperialism, that focus on authoritarianism, that focus on Nazism.
And furthermore, I would argue that there is a lot of people that have since changed their ways or are atoning for their sins. Or like, for example, if we go into popular culture, Wolfenstein is a very popular video game series that tackles a certain occupation.
I mean, there's also Inglourious Bastards.
Exactly.
As well.
So this is not, like movies like Schindler's List. Like, this is not out of the ordinary to reference a historical event or a historical, like, what do you call it? Like a army?
Yeah, well, I mean,
military force. Because I don't want. I'm not going to say like it's like Germany, because that's not fair to German nowadays.
Yes.
But
and not to mention as well that, like, despite what we learned from history, there's still a rise of neo-Nazism across the world right now, which is insane. But this is the reality we live in, and therefore, with those kinds of historical and cultural sensitivities, it would make sense to maybe do your research and think, hey, is this depiction of a Nazi the right thing to do? And I don't think that they necessarily knew how to deal with it. Like, what was crazy as well was I saw this actually was a real thing too. I think around 8 years ago there was a Thai girl group.
Yes.
Right?
I didn't want to mention it, but yes. In certain Southeast Asian countries or certain places in Asia,
Nazi clothing is popular for some reason.
Super weird. It is, and as an American, super weird.
They justify it as like it's just fashion culture.
Yeah.
Which
okay, and again, the biggest benefit of the doubt to them, I would argue they don't understand the ramifications of what they're doing.
It's like saying that Adolf Hitler was an amazing artist because he was in art school. He was in art school.
It's like, maybe.
Okay, that is
maybe
possibly true, but I think you're also
ignoring everything else, bro.
You're ignoring the biggest Nazi elephant there is in the room. And you can't expect everybody to know about this shit, right? Like, it's hard to basically have everybody on the same level of historical and cultural understanding when really Thailand had nothing to do with Nazism.
Now, it also is important to note that with Kinnikuman, that right now, literally right now, as of recording and probably as of airing, they are on Netflix. They have a series on Netflix. And episode 0, I think, that got a 6.49. And I think they're doing, Production IG is doing a series on it. Okay, fine.
Definitely with no Brocken Jr., though.
So I guess,
or at least a less Nazi depiction of Brocken Jr.
I don't know. It's just like I don't know how to feel about this other than the obvious thing of what the fuck are you thinking? But I also don't know what the fuck you're thinking. That's why I don't know.
Yeah,
I just think it's an easy thing to not do. But I mean, I don't know.
This isn't like overtly, but definitely where they're going with this. There is a series called Tanya.
Yeah, can't you like imply? I mean, I would argue that's already teetering, right? But Tanya the evil is, or their uniform, or the way that she portrays herself.
You very much know where they're going.
You know what you're doing. But on the other hand, it is not overtly, I'm just like,
it's not. Yeah, you're meant to hate this character, right?
Yes.
I mean, Tanya the Evil is not meant to be a character like. So, for example, like, this is a bit of a tangent, but the Narcos series. right? So Narcos Mexico came out, right? And
It's a Spanish IRL Netflix series, right?
well, I mean Spanish language,
Yes.
English language. It's about the drug war in Mexico, but Narcos Mexico focuses on one of the big bads,
Pablo,
right? Pablo Escobar is Colombian.
I am so sorry, dear listeners. I made a really fatal cultural mistake. My bad. Continue, Will.
It's okay. Jason doesn't know anything about drugs, so he would not know about any of this. So it focuses on the main big villain of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, who was the leader of the Guadalajara cartel, IRL. And it was portrayed by Diego Luna, who very, very well established and popular Mexican actor. He's got a role within the Star Wars universe as well. And he's done a bunch of other movies.
Basically, dude is legit, right?
Very legit. I love him.
So,
I mean, he plays. I didn't watch Rogue One, but it seems like people love his portrayal of Cassian Andor in both the Rogue One series as well as the Disney Plus TV series.
The
of
Han
Andor.
Solo one?
No, Rogue One.
Oh, Rogue One. Okay.
Yeah, Han Solo is a separate one.
Okay.
But
Rogue One's the one with Donnie Yen, right?
yes,
Yes.
he's the bland.
Yeah, he's the blind guy.
Yeah. So as much as people love the series, Diego Luna, the actor, took issue with a lot of characters also saying, "Yo, Felix Gallardo, man, that guy's fucking awesome," and he's just like, "No, you're taking this all wrong." Like, you're not.
I see what
Because himself, as a Mexican actor portraying a Mexican cartel leader, his purpose of doing this role was to let people know this was one of the most evil men of all time.
Yeah, it reminds me of that German movie Downfall that has that meme with a certain person in a bunker.
Yes.
So the person who plays the character,
Yeah, Bruno Ganz.
like he has gone on record to kind of talk about his performance and like the ramifications and everything, and it's very insightful to know that like what you're dealing with, right? So similarly with this other actor, it's like I am doing this to kind of illustrate a point, and you guys are totally off the mark, guys.
It's crazy though, because it's like in fiction, in media, like there's always going to be fans of villains, right?
Right.
And it's because some of them, more often than not, are very well written, and it's also you also got that weird kind of thing where it's like, yeah, they are villains, but it's like the Thanos,
The
thing,
anti-hero
right?
kind of thing,
Thanos
right?
is trying to solve, one of the issues.
Overpopulation, right?
It's just the way he's doing it is incredibly evil, right?
Exactly.
And
Or
so you have that
incredibly
kind of discussion.
senseless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas like there's nothing you can do to say that there was a reason why Felix Gallardo started a Mexican drug cartel. There's no reason why you could say that Adolf Hitler decided to do what he did, right? So I think with regards to the Kinnikuman situation, look, I don't think it is an instance of Nazi sympathy. I don't think that they're trying to say that, like, like, there are some good Nazis. I think it was just done
Insensitive. I think it's just very insensitive.
Or they just didn't know. They just didn't know what they were doing
No.
with it.
I would argue they know what they're doing, but they don't understand the weight and
Yeah,
ramifications
that's
behind
true.
it.
The fact that they still decided to put him in, Nazi attire and then call him a good
Right.
Nazi. Yeah, I see
right?
your point there.
Like,
yeah.
like you could easily Google or talk to your grandfather and know the ramifications. However, if you don't live through it, right? Or like, for example, if we talk about it like 20 years down the line, Will, to like whoever, like, oh, COVID was fucking terrible and like blah, blah, blah. And people didn't live through COVID back, like, like in the future, they'll be like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. But when we lived through it, right? It's real to us. It's like we lived through it. So to kind of brush it aside and kind of treat it with no tact, no grace is really, it's almost like extra offensive.
Yeah, I think it was essentially just trying to do something without properly realizing how heavy the feedback would be and how they had to deal with it.
And in my opinion, it's really easy to tell.
Yeah.
You just didn't think it's that big of a deal, which is like the biggest miscalculation ever.
Yeah.
That being said, though, we're going to go even fucking deeper now.
Yeah, we are now into the abyss. Yet another massive content warning. If you've already been able to stomach what we just talked about, then get ready for the next 3, the last 3 of today's Iceberg. If you have already made it this far but feel like, I'm going to tap out, go ahead. We're going to start things off with the lightest of the 3.
In our opinion.
XL Saga. So, XL Saga was a manga series written and illustrated by Roshi Rikudo that ran from 1996 to 2011, a long 15-year run. 25-year run. Did I get that right? No, 15-year run. This science fiction surreal comedy follows the attempts of Across, a secret ideological organization to conquer the city of Fukuoka, one of my favorite places in the world, as the first step towards world domination. The titular character of the series, XL, is a key member of the group who is working towards completing this goal. While the city is being defended by a shadowy government agency led by Dr. Kabapu. Solid premise so far, right? External forces trying to take over the world and all that. So it got a anime adaptation done by JC staff and was directed by Shinichi Watanabe between 1999 and 2000.
Oh, Watanabe. What is he known for?
Wait. This is Shinichi Watanabe.
Still.
The person you are talking about is Shinichiro Watanabe. So don't. Yes, another mistake, Jason.
Ooh.
2 completely different people. So not the person who did all those fucking movies like, I don't know, Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo and a lot of other really cool shit. Like, no, not Shinichiro Watanabe, Shinichi Watanabe. Okay? So, the anime itself has some pretty decent metrics. 7.49 is a raw score, 1,972 for popularity. Things look pretty good, right? It was slated to run for 26 episodes, and at the request of the publisher, the anime series will follow a different storyline from the manga, with Rikudo, the mangaka, stating that they were pleased with the adaptation. However, out of the 26, only 25 of them would air in Japan because for the last 26th episode, named Going Too Far, the episode was deliberately created to be too violent and obscene for broadcast in Japan and was instead included as a DVD bonus. Shinichi Watanabe commented that it felt good to go past limits of a TV series, although subsequently he thinks it, quote unquote, is not something you should do too often. It seems that the content of this episode includes instances of lesbianism, nudity, pedophilia, prostitution, and excessive gore. It should be noted as well that shortly after this anime series, the team responsible for the anime adaptation would also go on to make Puni Puni Poemi, a 2-part OVA spin-off from the original series that was banned in New Zealand on the grounds that it promoted and supported the exploitation of children and young persons for sexual purposes. Now, I know that you're still reeling from the fact that you mixed up Shinichi and Shinichiro Watanabe. That's completely fine. Their names are way too fucking similar, and I needed to state that so people don't make that fucking mistake, right? Don't bombard Shinichiro Watanabe with this XL Saga shit because he had nothing to do with it. But at the other end as well, right? When we focus on what's happening here, let's not even talk about Puni Puni Poemi. That's a whole different basket of fucked up, right? Why did you decide after 25 episodes things are going well, right? 7.49, 197 popularity, ranked 1,929. Those are all really good stats, right? But then you decide that because you wanted to just, do it for the lols, right? You seriously just wanted to see how many buttons you can push and then fuck around and find out. Again, it's another one of those fuck around and find out situations.
Except it is monstrably deliberate to the point where like all the others, like in this episode, you could kind of argue maybe they just didn't understand the ramifications, or they knew what they were doing, but they didn't know like what was the reaction, or they were being insensitive. This one was like, no. I know what I'm doing, and I just want to see how like shit will unfold. I'm like, bro, this is the what I'm like a loss for words, because it's just like, again, also, by the way, it's different than Excel World, by the way, which is like an isekai, I think.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like weird like similar namings and stuff. So just be careful, guys. But the point I'm trying to make is like, I don't know what to make of this, because it's like, on one hand, it's like, oh, cool, you're trying to be fringe, but on the other hand, it's like so unnecessary to the point where it's just very like problematic, in my opinion, like extremely.
It should also be known that whilst he was like working as on the storyboard for various episodes,
I think
episode 26, along with episode 20, but particularly episode 26, he was not only doing the storyboard, but he was also the episode director.
So like the thing is, right? Like, it, to me, with the obvious issues of what was discussed in terms of the themes of that episode aside, and the motive in terms of being very deliberate aside, what I think that is also extremely egregious, right? So I've already acknowledged the controversial part, or him, the Watanabe being very, like, I just want to see.
I'm going to pause you there, because this might actually help with your discussion here, where in Excel Saga, he also, Shinichi Watanabe appears as a character called Nabe Shin. Now, it's a portmanteau of two words, Nabe being the second part of his name, Watanabe, and Shin as in Shinichi. And he said that the name came to him from God. He had a God complex to put himself into Excel Saga, directed and produced the final episode, and he decided, well, I'm untouchable here.
And it's by JC Staff, obviously a very big, well-known anime studio to this day. And again, going off of what I was trying to say earlier, to me, one of the more, like, the other, again, not trying to say it's any more or less severe or unimportant or important, it is extremely selfish. Because if you think about all of the staff that worked on it, or all of, like, the assistants and all of that, you are essentially taking a big dump on their reputation, or on JC Staff's reputation, just so that you can make a statement on a whim, maybe? It is so fucked up in many ways.
Well, at least in the industry, he still manages to get some work done. I mean, more recently, he worked on a storyboard for Tear Moon Empire. He worked on a bunch of stuff in the last 20 years, ever since, I mean, he even worked on a storyboard episode for Bleach. So very clearly, he was intending to just fuck shit up one time and see what happens and never do it again. But at the same time, I have said many, many times in today's episode, what are you thinking? What are you trying to do?
I can answer that question. Clearly, he just doesn't think.
No. I think he thought too much of himself. That's probably what it was.
Yeah, sure.
I think it was just the fact that like he got so overly confident and he thought that he can get away with it, and he did in a way, because it still came out just on DVD form for people who really wanted to see what the fuck was going on. Right? Broadcasters were like, "Halt this shit! You've had 25 episodes, but this last one, no, this shit ain't gonna fly."
Like, is it just trying for shock value to, like, I'm just, okay.
We'll never know. We never know why he decided to do this.
Similarly, our next entry, I also do not know what the fuck to do about it.
Yeah, we're jumping straight into some even more fucked up shit now.
To be clear, dear listeners, when I was looking at this docket, this was the I think one of two stories that I was like, nah. I was so against it. Because
I mean, yeah, you can put it all on me if you want. Yeah.
No, it's not. I mean, we're gonna own it because ultimately we recorded it. But I'm still immensely uncomfortable about it. But let's go on.
We're talking about, like many other YouTubers, Anitubers, and bloggers have talked about, Midori Shoujo Tsubaki, an anime that was so fucked up that it got banned globally. So, if you just want to know the too long didn't read part, TLDR, it's just a really, really fucked up movie.
We are not going to go into the intricacies of the plot synopsis, are we? Because it's super, super not okay.
Here's the thing. I will do what I intend to do, which is to at least give some background information about it first.
Fair.
So, Midori is a 1992 Japanese independent semi-animated eroguro, which is basically erotic gore, fantasy horror drama film done by Hiroshi Harada, based on Suehiro Maruo's comic version of the Shoujo Tsubaki Kamishibai. So Kamishibai is an old form of Japanese street theater and storytelling that was done during post-war Japan and during the 30s, where there was the Great Depression.
Okay, so
this is what is super crazy and controversial about this.
Everything
is legitimately 100% everything. So it follows a female character, Midori, who was born into a poor family living with her bedridden mom, and in order to make ends meet, she has to drop out of school and sell camellia flowers across the city, where she meets a man by the name of Koichiro Arashi. This man tells her that if she's ever in trouble, she can visit him. And upon returning home, she finds that her mother has unfortunately passed away and is partially being eaten by rats. So at this point, she didn't just die. She's already straight up decomposed, and now her body is rotten and being eaten by critters. Now, an orphan, she decides to actually go to Arashi, who takes her to his circus freak show.
Okay. Okay.
As you can imagine, Midori's life does not get any better. She's forced to work as a servant, and she's constantly bullied, abused, tortured, SA'd, I'm not going to say those two words, by bizarre and disfigured freak show performers. Now, the circus has also been falling on bad times, so in order to make more money, Arashi decides to hire a bunch of other people, right? One being Masamitsu, who is an overweight, middle-aged man with dwarfism, who's also a person who loves children in the wrong way, but decides to take Midori as his child bride and also act as her guardian, protecting her from abuse of the other performers and grooming her. I'm not going to go into the character descriptions of the other characters because Masamitsu is already super fucked up, and the other ones are way more fucked up than that. Fast forward into the story, Arashi decides to run away from the circus, forcing the whole circus troupe to disband. Midori and Masamitsu end up leaving the circus together, and one day, as Masamitsu leaves Midori at a bus stop while he goes to buy food for her, he ends up being stabbed to death by a thief. Unaware of his death, Midori believes that Masamitsu has simply abandoned her. She's got full-on Stockholm Syndrome now. And you know what? Like, oh, I thought you were going to take care of me, protect me, even though you are a child predator that's been grooming me. No. So she decides to just run away somewhere and begins hallucinating and starts seeing like all the troupe members from the circus mocking, bullying, essaying her again. And as she attempts to sort of attack the hallucinations, they all suddenly disappear. And through her trauma, she suffers a mental breakdown, and the story ends with her alone and sobbing. It is implied at the end that Midori may have taken her own life. If you made it this far, congratulations. You are a steel-witted, strong-stomached human being that has probably seen some crazier shit in their life, and I don't even want to know what that is. But this film actually came out. This film was actually released across theaters wherever it could be released. And in 1994, there was a censored version of the film that was produced for future screenings at the request of EIRIN, EIRIN, the Japanese Film Censor Board. Unsurprisingly, the film is incredibly hard to find, as Harada only screens Midori in Japan if the venue is presented as a carnival freak show. Not just a movie, it's got to be a whole experience. So from 1994 to 2006, outside of standard definition videotape transfers of the original master, the film was only available in the form of prints with visuals and audio censorship in place. So, the fact that there was a censored version in the first place, I have to wonder, was there even anything to watch? If you managed to censor the main fucked up things about it, I don't know if there's any movie left to consume.
Now, this anime is one of those properties that if you were to go down any, anime iceberg,
Rabbit hole, whatever.
Eventually, at some point, you will encounter this. There are plenty of AniTubers, YouTubers that have covered this, and obviously we are no different covering it now. And it goes without fucking saying that this shit is horrific as fuck. I think I watched some YouTubers talk about it, but obviously the footage and everything are probably, I don't even remember, but if to my knowledge, if I even remember bits and pieces, is they can't even show you. They just show you maybe the beginning or very.
They won't actually show you the stuff that got censored because it got censored for a reason.
Yeah,
and there's also a reason why I didn't go over the full synopsis. I totally could have.
Totally could have.
I actually have a list of all the characters in this movie that I could easily tell you about. But I fear that if you actually listen to what I say, you're going to be so disgusted that you're going to turn off this podcast and never come back again. So I will refrain from that. If your morbid curiosity gets the better of you, you can look for it on Wikipedia. Do not try and find the movie.
Please don't. I don't even know how you would, but just don't.
Now, to the main issue here, which is, why was this even produced in the first place?
Why?
Well, as we mentioned in the beginning, it was an independent, meaning it was self-produced. Funding was extremely hard to come by for this movie, and I wonder why. The other thing that was actually really unsettling was that it was semi-animated, meaning there were some IRL things in there too.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
As in, I don't think that, the fucked up things were done IRL. I think it was just that, some things were spliced in because of obviously it was going to be production issues. This guy, Hiroshi Harada, basically did the whole thing himself. I don't know if you're going to go to a production studio and be like, hey, I want to make this movie. No, get the fuck out of my office. You go to an independent animator. No. I don't want my name attached to this thing at all.
In the pantheon of entertainment, there are a number of IRL or animated stuff that is of a certain shock value that is meant to be controversial just because. Midori is very much the anime equivalent of that. I mean, if we talk about other IRL stuff, was a Serbian film and other very questionable stuff, it is, I would argue, as someone who has not watched a single minute of Midori, I would argue it is in a similar tone and vein, I guess.
And let's be clear as well. I mean, yes, this movie and comic are fairly recent in the fact that it came out in the last 40 years. But it is, okay, the manga, Mr. Arashi's Amazing Freak Show, was published in 1984. And this was still, I mean, let's be real, right? It was 40 years after the Second World War. It was still many years after the Great Depression, but Japan was still very much feeling the effects of the Second World War, especially what happens to the country itself. And so a lot of stories that came out from it, I mean, we've talked about Barefoot Gen, about its depiction of the Second World War and all that. those things are still very raw experiences for a lot of people. And so like it would not be so crazy to see these kinds of stories come out in the form of street theater, kamishibai. My issue here though is the fact that I don't know what the original story was supposed to be like, but the manga as well as the anime movie are reinterpretations of the original source. Meaning, was it always that fucked up, or did they intend to make it even more fucked up? The other thing as well was with Hiroshi Harada, apparently, and also with the manga itself by Suehiro Maruo. This was supposed to be based off of real life experiences of whichever person, whether it was Harada or Maruo, I forgot which one it was, when they were growing up and they had also been kidnapped and sold to a circus, allegedly. I don't know how real that is because I don't want to find out more. But it's okay, first of all, there is no surprise that the original manga series is completely out of print for the English edition. The anime film itself is so infamous that it's never shown in a conventional movie theater or even released for home video outside of Japan. Oh no, it has been released for video outside of Japan. Oh fuck, okay. And get this. There was also a live action film adaptation of it released in May 2016 in Japan. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to look about it. Yeah. So where do we go from here in terms of talking about Midori? Because on one hand, this is purely fiction. This is obviously a story that is not real, hopefully, and made for whether it is entertainment purposes, advocacy purposes, whatever it may be. However, I think that regardless of whether you are trying to do something for an entertainment or an artistic perspective, you also have to think, what do you want to do with this? Why do you feel that it was necessary to portray something in this sense? Much like, for example, when Jason talked about a Serbian film. Absolutely no need to portray any of that, even if it's for shock value, because holy fuck, people are not ready for that. I don't think people are ever ready for that. Now, for the ones who are morbidly curious and do want to find it, good luck. I'm sure you're not going to be able to find a legitimate copy of the movie, and if you are going to go down other avenues, that's on you. I refuse to watch it. I have no intention to watch it. I think just reading the Wikipedia entry is enough for me to want to rip my eyes out.
Okay, so our last entry.
Are you not going to say anything at all, Jason?
I don't know what else to say other than what we have already talked about.
I think, well...
And I'm not trying to troll you. I'm not trying to, like, move on from it. I legit don't know what to say other than what I have already said.
I mean, do you feel that there's any space for something like this to exist? I mean, like you mentioned, like so then what's your position on the Serbian film?
It should not exist.
Right. But why do you think these things exist then? Why do you think that there are people who decide that, you know, there is going to be interest in this sort of story, or at the very least they feel they're so compelled to tell the story that they actually scrounge the last dollar they have and just create it by hand?
You're gonna have to ask them.
No. I mean,
like legitimately, like I don't know. I you can look at their interviews. You could interview them. You could try to figure it out. I guess rationalize your way, but to a certain point, I think it's fruitless. I just feel like at a certain point, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You know?
Yeah.
And of course, you could say then, Jason, well, what about this other thing? Why are you more okay with this and not okay with that? Look, I have no idea.
I mean, school days.
Sure.
Right?
Like,
should that exist?
I would argue probably not either. But also, it's like, well, then where's the line? What about this? What about that? Right? Okay. What about Elfin Lead? What about this? What about... Okay. But for me, personally, Midori is like one of those things, urban legends, that's just like, I think it's better off as an urban legend rather than knowing, well, obviously, because it is a real thing, that it exists. It's just...
Well, the entity, the story itself exists. And we're not talking about the content of the story, in which, whatever happened, the synopsis, those are hopefully not real, right?
And I feel like at a certain point, the creator or whatever reason you give is going to be lost on pretty much every person on the planet. At a certain point...
Well, maybe 99%.
Sure.
There's definitely going to be some people out there
that it speaks to them, or they understand, or they're okay with it.
Or they just view it as art.
And
like, with any form of art, whether it be, through paintings, through stories, through movies and whatnot, there has to be a certain level of context and acceptability of what you perceive to be art. And I think in many cases, Jason will definitely agree, this would not really be deemed art. Now, I'm not talking about all of Eroguro in general, right? I think that I definitely have read some Eroguro, and there's some which I think are incredibly beautiful, as fucked up as they are. But that's what it just is.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, just like how Junji Ito or Parasite, the Maxim,
with their body horror and all that.
Yeah, like, you can look at that and be like, that's grotesque, which it is, or like, that should not exist, which you could argue that for sure. Yet Will and I like Junji Ito as an author, as like their works. Uzumaki's coming out with a new trailer as of recording that I watched the other day. It was pretty crazy. It looks pretty good, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's so senseless, Midori. And that's like, ultimately, I just don't get it.
Yeah, there really is no way for me to back this up either. Like, the fact that I already don't want to watch it and don't want to continue reading about like the story itself, even though like morbidly curious, I do want to figure out like why this thing even exists in the first place. The listeners out there, 110% do not look for this thing,
or don't think too much about it beyond what we have mentioned, or maybe your Wikipedia Google search. That should just stay like that. Now,
well, my Google search is tainted now because I've been reading a lot about this stuff.
So, even though you might say that should be the way that we end Iceberg number 2, we actually have one more
that is actually, in my opinion, is more fucked up.
And in my opinion, a more interesting discussion, if I could argue.
Well,
that
it's also got more implications on IRL in real life as well.
And I would say more broadly speaking, for sure. So, Will, let's talk about Act H.
Yeah, finally talking about Act H. So, Act H was anime, and it was a manga series that was serialized from January 2018 until its cancellation on August 2020. So, 12 volumes have been released, and it's focusing on the story of Kei Yonagi, a high school girl who strives to become an actress. She lives with 2 younger siblings, and after their father left them and their mother passed away. Kei has an extreme talent for method acting, to the point where she loses track of reality while acting. And in addition, some speculate that acting of this intensity could be self-destructive, and cite that as a reason for not accepting her. However, Kei catches the eye of the highly acclaimed director Sumiji Kuriyama, who steps forward with the intent of bringing out her full potential. Sounds fucking great. The fact that it already had 12 volumes is fucking awesome.
The fact that on Mal it has currently an 8.23, rank 380, and popularity 323. Great.
However, again, we have to bring bad news. On August 8th, 2020, it was reported that Matsuki, the mangaka of the writer of the manga, was arrested for allegedly approaching and inappropriately touching 2 female middle school students in June of that same year. Editors from WSJ stated that they would be taking the matter seriously, and it was later announced that the series would be immediately ended in publication, with the chapter released on August 11 being the last one. On August 17, 2020, it was announced that Shueisha has suspended all sales of the manga and that Volume 13 and beyond would be cancelled. On August 24th, 2020, Shiro Uzasaki issued, this is the artist for the illustrator for the manga.
So to be clear, this person is not accused of anything.
Yeah, they were issuing a statement expressing sympathies for the victims and did not want the manga to be a work that triggers similar reactions from the victims, considering the cancellation to be appropriate. Despite regrets of having to end the manga midway, Uzasaki urged fans to, of the series to not harass or blame the victims. And then, shortly afterwards, Matsuki, the accused mangaka, was formally indicted for the second of the 2 indecent acts committed, and they were sentenced on December 23 of that same year. The Tokyo District Court sentencing them a guilty verdict and giving them 1.5 years in prison that was suspended for 3 years. Matsuki would not need to serve his sentence if he remained on good behavior for 3 years. Now, following his arrest, Viz Media removed its listings of further manga volumes, and a planned stage play and stage play adaptation was also canceled. Now, there was another similar situation with another manga series called Please Tell Me Gaiko-chan, where the mangaka Kenya Suzuki was arrested and sentenced for CP crimes, and the manga was suspended, potentially canceled.
What was that manga/anime of the samurai with the X on the cheek? What's the name?
Rurouni Kenshin?
Yeah. That also, I think, right? The creator had a certain issue with similar outcomes, I would argue.
I would need to double check that. I don't want to report on anything that is not true.
I also do not want to say what it is if I am wrong, because...
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
So they do also have CP charges. And they were arrested back in 2017. However, the manga and the anime are still in serialization.
Yes. I mean, with the recent one, literally, airing last season, I think, as of recording.
Yep.
Or something like that, yeah. So
where do we go from here with Act Age?
The thing that, listeners, you have to understand about Act Age is, A, it is extremely highly acclaimed, as you can tell by the 8.23 on my anime list as of recording. Furthermore, the premise of Act Age is very, normal. It's about acting. It's literally about acting. There's nothing sketchy about it, at least on the premise side, and it is mainly due to the controversy surrounding the creator. Again, not the artist, the writer, if you will. And to me, this is a very interesting discussion because it poses the question of, at what point are you okay separating a person's work versus, their IRL escapades or personality? We have numerous instances in real life. For example, Kevin Spacey,
R. Kelly,
Woody Allen, maybe as well,
J.K. Rowling.
So it's just at what point are you okay with the works when the creator has all these issues, I guess you would argue?
Now, to be clear, I have not read a single volume of Act Age.
Neither have I. Not a single chapter, even though it was on my plan to read forever.
And from my perspective, the reason why I haven't read it is, partially because of the whole
discontinuation. Yeah. I mean, no, sorry. Yeah.
But also the fact it was out of respect for the victims and also for the illustrator who had nothing to do with it, right? Yeah, if I was to buy existing volumes, I may be able to financially support her, but that also means that the money would also end up in his pockets as well, and I don't want to do that. So it's a really tough situation, as Jason mentioned, because as soon as for example, R. Kelly was arrested and indicted on his shit, there are still people that still listen to I Believe I Can Fly.
Or, things like Chris Brown and Rihanna, and yet people still listen to Chris Brown.
There's still people that that still watch Mel Gibson movies. There's still people that are in the wizarding world despite all the vitriol that J.K. Rowling spews out on Twitter.
And whether you agree or disagree, believe or don't believe their stance of these creators, it is interesting to have a discussion when multiple people are involved in a project that are unrelated to the individual in question, but also it's like, can you separate as a viewer or consumer of that media the person and the IP?
Just to sort of give my 2 cents on this situation, I firmly feel that the situation with Act Age is worse than Midori Shoujo Tsubaki.
On a conceptual level, I agree.
Yeah, because of the fact that an actual crime was committed.
Yes.
Whereas one is like a work of fiction.
That is just really messed up.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't have been created, but you would argue that at least it's fictional to our knowledge, and
Yes.
it should be fictional.
Yeah. I mean, there's many instances of books and movies being banned. Like, I mean, there was the whole Catcher in the Rye thing going on as well,
of course, right? Like, but the issue then becomes, well, no pun intended, this is a committed crime that has been convicted, and also it's like, I would argue Act Age, at least on the surface, is very good as a property on its own.
You will notice how serious this discussion has gotten because I'm looking at the sound waveforms, and you're a lot quieter than you were before.
And
you were not. I mean, you were also this quiet when we were talking about Midori too.
well, yeah, because I wasn't saying anything.
Well, no, but you were also just very uncomfortable about Midori in general, right? Whereas this is like, it's not so much that you're uncomfortable, it's just the fact that you really do need to have a discussion about what it means to support works of a convicted criminal.
And this is on top of people who have not been convicted, or themes are heavily implied. For example, I think the AOT mangaka has gotten into some issues. The Record of Ragnarok mangaka has gotten into some issues with like imperialism or fascism, right? Or at least people would argue that. But in this case, with Act Age, it is at least proven in a court of law, convicted, guilty. So what do you do about the work that technically has obviously stemmed from that creator?
It's a victim. I think there's not much you can do about it. Look, whilst I was researching about Act Age and also just trying to get a general consensus of how people feel about this, for the most part, everyone is saddened by it. Because of how good the manga is. And unfortunately, it just reached this end because someone decided that certain crimes were okay to commit. So,
yeah. And you could argue, okay, if it was a lesser or a more mid, IP, then maybe people are more okay with abandoning it. I mean, you could argue that.
Well, that's actually where you might be a bit wrong, because for the most part, a lot of people, while saddened that it's not there anymore, they're fine as it is. In fact, there's actually a very loud minority of people that want it to get adapted.
Right.
And for them, because of the fact that I read one commenter in particular, where they were very upset that they not that it was canceled, but the fact that there is no anime adaptation, and they were calling for it because it's such a beautiful story and all that.
Sure, but when was it timestamped, or whenever it was?
It was like last year or two.
So
it's actually fairly recent.
So is it before or after the conviction?
I said in the last year.
Okay.
The conviction was 2020.
Got it. I'm just putting the timeline out there. So, yeah, I mean.
And then the argument they had was, the person was charged and convicted, but they didn't serve their crime because it was suspended. It was a suspended sentence.
I think at that point, you just that person lost the plot already.
And everyone else was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, at that point, that's not, in my opinion, where the discussion should be.
Yeah. And I think that, like, with this particular situation, I think that it is rightfully canceled and that nothing else should come out of it, despite the fact the acclaim that it has gotten as a very popular manga series. And the reason for me is because if there was to be any further publication, whether or not, for example, like the illustrator manages to find another writer to pick it up, it would be insanely disrespectful to the victims of this crime, to the people that were affected by this crime.
Furthermore, on top of everything you just said, which obviously I agree, it won't be the same, by the way, right? Like how could you at that point? Like it's already destroyed. It's already sullied. You can't. It's tainted. You can't. It's a no-go zone. You can't.
I, for the most part, am like, it's really hard to be able to disconnect the product of work from its creator.
Also,
which is why, like now, like I stay away from anything Harry Potter related. I stay away from anything Michael Jackson or R. Kelly related.
Also, by the way, okay, on top of everything, by the way, Will, I agree, right? Let's say this commenter that you said that you're paraphrasing at face value. It's like, okay, you want an anime? Sure. But like there's only going to be 12 volumes. So
that commenter also did state, and again, allegedly, because again, internet stuff, you have no idea what's real or not.
Sure.
They also did state that they're heavily autistic too.
Okay. Well, okay.
But even then, it's also
that doesn't,
like, yeah,
right. But okay, so then it's just at that point, it's just like, okay, so then there's a finite amount of resources. Furthermore, if we go by our OG traditional purpose of anime is to promote the source.
Yep.
Good luck. It's not going to happen. And what you get at most, 12 volumes? So it's like, 3 seasons maybe? And that is if people would even check the anime out to begin with.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I don't think from every standpoint, financial, creative, or otherwise, it could continue.
I think even like the diehard fans would probably see reason as to why an adaptation should never come out of it, nor should a continuation of the manga itself. There is going to be a very, very strong minority, a very minute minority of people that, just see past all of this and still think that it's something that's worthy of continuing and adapting, because for them, these charges, the experiences of the victims, doesn't matter to them.
Which is, I would say, valid for them, right? Because that's their stance. They don't literally know what it's like. But you also have to understand that, at least from my standpoint, from what I'm seeing, every other aspect, like financial or like the controversy that you're going to drum up, the sentiment that you would get from the general public if you were to so-and-so either announce an anime adaptation or even continue the manga under a different name or a different writer, it's just not going to work. No one is going to. It's a sinking ship that is just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's an extremely unfortunate situation, but it is the necessary consequence. It is something that I think whenever we try and talk about any forms of entertainment, media, and whatnot, as soon as someone's reputation is on the line, there are other people that get affected by it. I mean, dude, like look what happened with Disney and what was his name, Jonathan Majors, right? Oh, actually, yeah, you don't know anything because you don't actually give a fuck about the MCU. So Jonathan Majors was supposed to play.
Oh, Kang?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What are you going to do about that?
Well,
right?
Well, we know what we're going to do about it because they did it, which is like, let's just move on from that thing and move on to Robert Downey Jr.
Fucking crazy twist right there. I did not see that coming, but I also, that kind of furthers my, like, not disdain, but like my disinterest in the MCU because I don't feel like
it's
it
like
was
nostalgia bait, basically.
Well, yeah, that, and also like it actually kind of ruins the nostalgia for me.
Yes, it does.
Right? Because now it's like, well, who's Iron Man now then?
No, but Will, there is a comic book plot line from like 1980s where Doctor Doom.
We're not gonna talk about Robert Downey Jr. in MCU. We're talking about crime here,
right? So yeah. It's not at the same level at all.
So with Act Age, I think that it's done and dusted. There's going to be nothing more out of it. I mean, there has been nothing more out of it for the last 4 years. And the crazy thing as well is when Jason and I started out this podcast, not soon after when we released our first couple episodes, the news dropped.
Right.
We read about it real time in the midst of our first couple episodes recording because it all happened in 2020. Or
I think we even talked about it. So
we sort of mentioned it here and there, but we never found like the right platform or opportunity to discuss it because one, it was still very raw, and two, it just felt like, well, where do we go from here if we talk about just this, right?
As like an inside baseball, I originally wanted to do like a BP episode kind of talking about separating creators from their works kind of discussion, but then I realized the gravity and weight of it as a BP might not
because
stand.
then what would we have to do for like the hour and a half? Will we then like sort of like look at like both sides of the story when really like we know what the outcome is and there's no need to try to, analyze, commentate, or even, God forbid, defend the other side of the story, right? And we just see that like if things are the way they are, things have become clear in terms of what crimes have committed and what the outcomes of what productions there are. That's it. So I'm sad for the fans of Act Age, not because there's no more manga or anime, but because this was how it ended.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's really it, really.
Yeah. I hope everybody that's listens to the last 6 entries of this Iceberg is doing well. I'm sure you're shell-shocked. I'm sure that you have been shaken to the core. But these weren't necessarily picked for no reason. I think that all of these are examples of what can and can't be done in the industry, and how there needs to be serious pre- and afterthought of what you're trying to achieve in the medium, whether it is a manga, an anime, IRL, whatever form of entertainment, because and this is not inclusive of Act Age, because I don't think Act Age itself was like a production thing, right? Like Midori was totally a production thing because the guy decided to take reins and make his own horror story a reality. Exile Saga was because someone got way too confident and decided he wanted to shake up the industry by producing one of the most fucked up episodes of anime of all time, right? Master Roshi was a creation of a really, really misogynistic past and has still existed in the 21st century. Kinnikuman was just massive oversight in thinking you can even sympathize a Nazi character. And Get School was just two dumbasses thinking that saying the N-word was okay. Whereas Act Age, unfortunately, wasn't even a manga production thing. It was just because of the fact that their creator was a criminal. Yep. So where do we go from here? Like where do we sit on things in terms of all these? I didn't want to like make this a purely controversial thing because look, the first 6 weren't even really controversies. It was just more things that came to light. The Manglobe thing was definitely like bad mismanagement. Drifter was just people being lazy and all that. But as you keep going down and down this rabbit hole, you start seeing that as much as anime and manga is still very much and growing in terms of its likability and its popularity, we have to be fully aware that sometimes the content that we consume we should be very, very thankful for, because there is probably going to be another case of bad mismanagement, someone deciding that fucked up things are good to screen, and there's going to be people that defend criminals when they love a certain property.
If I were to kind of instill this whole episode into one of the lines that I kind of always rely on, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. I think a lot of you could defend things, you could say one way or the other, but should you say it? Should you do it? I don't know. Is it cool that Time Paradox Ghostwriter is like a meta plot? Like, is that all right? Like, yeah, sure. You have every right to write it. You have every right to have an opinion on it.
But you also have every right to be ready for the reception you get from it.
Fuck around and find out, right? I mean, I would say that that's like the second thing that I would argue is like kind of like the mantra of this whole episode.
You can do whatever you want. Just be ready for the repercussions. That's it.
Yeah. And do your homework.
Yeah. Definitely do your homework. You fucking get schooled, people. Oh my God. And also Kinnikuman.
So, now that that's all said and done, we would like to thank you for listening to this episode of the Good Anime Palette podcast. If you want to, we'd greatly appreciate you leaving a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. I mean, if you want, you can also just email us at gapalette@gmail.com, GAPALETTE, all lowercase, all one word. on X/Twitter using the handle @PaletteGood, capital P and capital G, all one word.
If you don't use Twitter/X, completely fine. I don't use it either. So,
and we're also on a bunch of social media platforms. Links in the show description, and our Discord server is also in the show description. We have a website. We encourage you to check it out, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. Music credits for this episode. Our intro music is Married to the Light by oomiee. Our break music is Green Summer Waves by Kyo. And our outro music is Weeping by Cushy. You can support the artists that we feature by listening to them on Spotify, Apple Music, or your music listening platform of choice. And Epidemic Sound provides all of our royalty-free music. If you're interested, you can sign up using the referral link in our show description. Terms and conditions apply. Now that like this anime Iceberg 2 is all done and dusted, how do you feel, Will?
I feel great in the sense that like I had an opportunity to talk about, and I'm hoping that you also felt the same in terms of like certain stories that would not have gotten much of a spotlight as a solo topic or as like a BP. I think that there are certain things that like should be known by the listeners or anybody that comes across this content. Not in the sense that like, oh, you should know how fucked up Midori is, or like, you know, maybe you shouldn't be racist and all that. I think those things are very clear to
plain
people,
as day, yeah.
Right. But it's also like you sometimes you just need to know that the industry itself is rife with controversy every now and then, and there are going to be times when like you are waiting to watch a much anticipated sequel or even just an anime adaptation only for things to fall through the cracks because of bad mismanagement. These things happen.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was like sort of core crux of why I wanted to do this idea of the lost, the banned, and the canceled, because sometimes whenever you don't see a sequel and you're really upset about it, you should at least be thankful you got to watch something.
Yeah. And there are plenty of things that you might not know that's happening behind the scenes, or might not even be everyone's fault except for a select few in the production side that caused everything to fall apart.
Yeah.
It is definitely emblematic of any entertainment industry because we're kind of showing their flaws up front and center, but is also our way to learn from history and not repeat our mistakes for any industry.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Adu, for all the support and listening to this episode. I know it's a very long episode. We're actually pushing close to 3 hours, but it was it was never easy to do that because there was such heavy shit to talk about in every single one of these.
Wasn't
entries.
our Iceberg one also pretty long too?
It was very long.
Yeah.
But these icebergs tend to be long anyway, right?
Because we not only have to explain but also give our thoughts on it. So we didn't want to just be like a regurgitation.
You didn't want to get your thoughts on Midori. You were just
I didn't. No, I'll be honest. I did not. I did not. I tried to give a few thoughts.
I was trying to come on, say something. Come on, man.
I did say something. To be fair, I did say a few things.
You actually said a lot of things at the end. But hopefully, in the future when we're doing our upcoming icebergs, the whole controversy, the whole fucked up angle of it is not going to be like the main core of all icebergs. It just so happened that with this particular episode, with this particular iceberg, there were some really fucked up things. So in the future, when we're doing other icebergs, we intend to explore other facets of the medium, and so therefore, we may not need to continue talking about things like Midori and Act Age.
It was just literally coincidental.
Yeah, happenstance and all that. So yeah, without further ado, thank you all again for listening to this episode. Get rested. See a therapist if you need to, because there was some real heavy shit discussed today. So by the time you're done with your session, we should be ready to release our next episode. So until then, catch y'all later.
Peace.